Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023. Good to see you all again. The time is now 6:30, and I'm going to call the District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. And Marilyn, if you could please call the roll.
Member Aubert?
Here.
Member Vita Daniels?
Here.
Member Dillon?
Here.
Member Grutch?
Here.
Member Kelly?
Here.
Member Swinehart?
Here.
Member Thomas?
Here.
Thank you, Marilyn. First up, do we have any agenda-related comments this evening?
No.
We will proceed to our agenda, which actually is pretty packed tonight. We have a lot to discuss, I think, regarding our press policy updates. But first, we're going to start with the Stipend Committee recommendations. Mr. Piotrowski.
Thank you, President Dillon. Tonight, the board is receiving 2 requests for stipends that have been recommended by the Stipend Committee. Information about each request has been provided to the board and is included in the board materials for tonight. We are proposing that the Sailing Club move from pilot status to full club status with an accompanying 2.64% stipend. This is a club that began meeting in pilot status in the 2021-2022 school year and has met consistently throughout this time. While the club itself does not engage in sailing on Lake Michigan, it does provide students with opportunities to learn about many different aspects of sailing, as well as making connections that they can use if they wish to sail with outside sailing organizations. You may know that there's a Lyons Township Sailing Club. It's not affiliated with the school, or it's not an official club of the school, but there's other sailing opportunities that students have participated in, and they've gained the knowledge about sailing through this club. The Stipend Committee has met and is recommending that we create a 2.64% stipend for this club. Additionally, we are also requesting an additional stipend to add a sponsor to our Dungeons & Dragons Club. The D&D Club has grown significantly since its inception, and right now there's approximately 50 to 60 members that participate at each meeting. One thing of note about this club, this is a club where ongoing participation is important because of the nature of the club. Club members are engaged in campaigns that may take multiple meetings to complete. So the participation numbers have shown that not only are students very interested in participating in D&D Club, but that they're also invested in consistent participation as opposed to going for one meeting and then maybe not going back for a few meetings. They are engaged consistently. Not only has there been growth in membership, but the club's offerings have also grown to include twice as many meetings, leadership opportunities to help students lead their own games, and the current club sponsor, Mr. Allen, has been holding special gaming events held each month on Saturdays, which provide students other opportunities to participate and compete and to work with other people in the area related to Dungeons & Dragons. As with Sailing Club, the Stipend Committee is requesting a 2.64% stipend for D&D. So now we would have two sponsors for D&D. And for reference, a 2.64% stipend equates to approximately $1,400 in stipend money. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
So a question with the sailing club, so there's a different sailing club that's different from this pilot.
That is correct.
Because I know that at one point, maybe a year or 2 ago, that sailing club may have asked.
There is a Lyons Township sailing team. It is a team that uses Lyons Township's name, like Lyons Township Hockey Club. Right. It is not affiliated with the school. That's the other sailing group that is out there. But there are no other official LT sailing clubs, just the one that we are talking about tonight.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, this is the one that came in May of 2 years ago, I think.
Correct.
We started talking about. So, I mean, that's my only comment. It's nice to
absolutely
nice to see these clubs that start in pilot and become, gain traction.
Absolutely.
And, something that kids want to do and offer more opportunities for our students to have those important experiences. So I think that's awesome.
Absolutely.
And Ed, remind us too when they get to the additional percentage stipend, how we arrive to that.
Sure. So the percentage amounts are based on a contractual formula that's found in the collective bargaining agreement with our faculty association. Essentially, every 1% of a stipend roughly equates to 14.4 hours, either in working with students or set up preparation hours and going from there. Sure.
information meeting.
Yes, we will.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great. And then next up, this is a big one. Some of us probably got cozy and read through our press policy updates over the break. But it's right back to you, Ed Pietrowski, with the first reading of Press 110.
Correct. Tonight, the board is receiving information pertaining to 50 board policies that are included in either Press Issue 110, which is the lion's share of these policies, as well as recommendations that the Illinois Association of School Boards have recommended to us, that policies that have references to collective bargaining agreements, and I'll talk about those ones last. As we have done for previous press issues, we've broken the policies into multiple groups, which I'll talk about briefly, and then give the board plenty of time if there are any questions about specific policies. We do have members of the central leadership team that can answer any questions about those policies, and if we need more information, we can certainly report back to the board at a later time for those as well if we can't answer them tonight. The policies in Section 1 are being recommended for review and monitoring, which is very similar to how the Illinois Association of School Boards recommends a 5-year review of other board policies. There are 8 policies being recommended for review and monitoring. These policies don't have substantial change or substantive changes. It's just they have not been reviewed as part of the press cycle in quite some time, and so IASB is recommending that they be reviewed and monitored as part of that process. Moving, as we talk about Section 1, are there any questions about any policies within Section 1? And as a reminder, they are listed in the board information by group, Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, and Section 4.
I think, Ed, the only thing I was going to say as a refresher, too, if you can just remind everybody one more time about press and why we subscribe to it and what our choices are and who press actually is.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful.
So press is a function of the Illinois Association of School Boards. And as you know from going through different policy committee meetings and reviewing our policies are far-reaching. They affect everything from board operations, fiscal operations, personnel, student life, community relations, and everything in between. The vast majority of these policies, if not all of these policies, have references to Illinois School Code, Illinois Public Act, Illinois Administrative Code. What press does, this service through the Illinois Association of School Boards, is they stay on top of changes to school code, changes to public acts, changes to policies that are needed. They work with school districts then to bring recommended language changes to keep them up to date, and then school districts are able to then take those recommendations, review them and accept them, or as many school districts do, then they might review them through their own district legal counsel for some policies, and then have the option of accepting some of those recommendations or keeping some of the language as is. Some policies, there's mandated changes, right? There's certain things that have changed in law that we have to have in board policies. Some of the recommendations are optional. That's why we go through our legal counsel as well. It's worth noting that we did send all of these policies to legal counsel for review, with the exception of the policies that have references to the collective bargaining agreements. There's only 7 really that Franzik, our legal counsel, has looked at and had language changes that are different from press. Of the other, I think it was 37 policies. Those are not substantive, and the changes aren't substantive in nature. They're just changes to legal footnotes or references.
Generally, Ed, are we on a similar cycle to other school districts?
Yes.
Like at the same time? So for example, for these 5 that have to come up for 5 year, that would be like probably statewide.
Correct. School districts that subscribe to the press, to press will receive Press 110 at the same time. And Marilyn, feel free to jump in with if I'm saying this correctly. We have a time frame, during which we have to.
There's a window to approve it by. So every school district right now is looking at Press 110, either now, February, March, like sometime this early winter, early spring. Every school district that subscribes to Press 110 or press will be looking at Press 110.
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, none of the policies that are up for review and monitoring would be ones that we touched and that long series of policy work that we did last year, right? So we haven't touched it. I didn't see anything in these that were particularly, there weren't a lot of changes recommended or any updates, so they.
No, in section 1, the only recommended thing to look at was policy 5170 for copyright, and Franzic's only response to that was just make sure it has an effective date, an updated effective date.
So I really like press because it really keeps us on track with our policies, which is an inordinate process if you get off of track. So
Yes,
I think
is.
this is fantastic. My only question from a process standpoint was going to be, and you kind of answered it, is how do you/we decide what we send to our attorneys for review versus, what we just choose to accept? Is it
Absolutely.
Is it just if there's just changes in the legal footnotes, we won't send it, but if there's any language changes in the actual policy, we do?
Yeah, we will actually review each one of these policies before we make the decision to send them to legal counsel. So that's exactly right. Dr. Waterman and I and then Marilyn will sit down and we'll take a look and we'll read through the proposed policy, the changes to see, okay, this is just an update to a legal reference. Something like that, those updates happen all of the time. That wouldn't be something that we would send to legal counsel for a review. Things that have rewritten policies or brand new policies, we would absolutely send to our legal counsel for review. And then the other thing that we will send to legal counsel for review is there are a lot of cross-references within these policies. For instance, when we were talking a couple of years ago when there was the brand new policy 2265, which was the Title IX sexual harassment complaint policy, that had references to other policies. Because of the far-reaching effect of that policy and how it had implications with the others, that would be a policy we would send to legal counsel, have them review, and then they would be able to make those make recommendations for changes to us, and also let us know how those changes would affect the other policies that refer to it. Absolutely.
And Ed, one other thing I did notice when I was going through there is there are some that, so I know that we talk kind of globally that we do this review every 5 years per press, but there are some that have to be updated or reviewed more frequently.
Correct.
They also notify us of that.
Correct.
They keep track of it's 2 years or it's 3 years.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, as Dawn was saying, the press. The function of press is incredibly useful and helpful, just because of the sheer amount of board policies and making sure that we are all, compliant with all of the different things that we need to be compliant with.
It really just avoids individual school districts having to pay attention to every legislative change, every policy change at the state level. Like it's a service that's used throughout the state.
I was just going to say, just to recap, like what John had said with which ones you had sent, it's really just the ones that are marked with forensic
Correct.
review.
Correct.
So it's just a select, those are the ones that you ascertained and then they did.
That is correct. And we certainly could send additional ones if through this discussion there are questions. We could certainly send that back to Franzic for review.
Those are the only ones that were sent.
That is correct.
They're marked, notated.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I make one comment? Franzic gets a copy, or like every school district's attorneys get a copy of the press as well. So they're already so if they thought that there was something else, they would probably reach out to Ed.
Okay, because I think we had done that before, that they had alerted us. I don't remember which one it was, but that wasn't happen this time. It was us doing it.
Yes, we had sent that one.
And remember, this is a first reading. February would be a second reading. So as Ed said, we may come up with policies tonight that we want to send to Franzic between the first reading and second reading. Just like we did, I think we did Press 109 last spring. Press 108 was fall of 21.
So I know that we looked at, as Julia mentioned, policies and behavioral policies, but looking at the standing board committees, it looks like there are two here that we don't have. The Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee and the Behavioral Interventions Committee.
Yeah, so with that one, we have, obviously, this board uses the committee, the whole structure. We haven't used the committee structure, the actual individual committee structure. We do, though, the Behavioral Interventions Committee and the Parent Advisory Committee. We have, actually, later tonight, Leslie's going to talk about the Student Handbook Committee that involves parents. That is how we function with having our handbooks updated. And so that's related to this policy. But we don't have those individual committees. That's something that, this board could talk about at the last 2 June workshops, and could certainly talk about, either resurrecting or starting an individual committee structure.
Parent-teacher advisory committee for the handbooks, that's regulation, as I recall, isn't it? Yeah.
But is that what this parent-teacher advisory committee is referring?
Yeah, I mean, I
Or
want
we're just using that handbook committee as.
So we've used that handbook committee as this committee. I think it's worth asking Franzik for their guidance on that parent-teacher advisory committee and the behavioral interventions committee. So I can do that for the second reading.
Right, I mean, the reason why I ask is those are the two bigger ones that we don't really have formal names for.
Right,
That
right.
the rest we do and have. That come before the committee of the whole.
Yeah, I'll get a little more information for the board on 1 and 2, which is under 2150.
It's hard to tell from the lead-in on that whether,
It gets
All
into like
committees are-
medicine distribution, and it gets into criminal offenses, like things like that. So I'd like to learn a little more about that.
So Brian, which ones again are you going to ask
So
for?
on policy, so it's policy 2150 committees.
Okay.
The standing board committees, it says the standing committee is created for an indefinite term. Standing committees are, number 1 says Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee and Behavioral Interventions Committee. So I think it's worth exploring what those refer to and how we make sure we honor those here.
and the lead-in does say the Board of Education may establish committees to assist with the board's governance function and in some situations to comply with state law requirements. So it's hard for me as the lay reader to understand whether all 7 are required under state law or none of them are, or
Right, no, I understand that it says may, but it's something that the board should talk about.
Right. Yep.
And discuss, because we haven't as a board.
And we've also, like, with regards to the committees, if you look at the website, originally we were assigned certain committees to there, like, for example, like I'm on the litigation committee and it's not listed there.
Yeah, like policy's not in,
Right.
the policy committee is not in this policy, which is interesting. Litigation's not on there, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good
So
point.
do we need to redo that and kind of tidy that up?
Yeah, that's-
Do we even need the committee?
Accurately reflect what we have, like our situation is.
And since we'd only do a committee of the whole, we haven't even referenced those committees that we're assigned to that are not there, so.
Okay, maybe we get Franzik to look at that.
I'll get some information back from Franzik on that.
Okay. Thank you.
The biggest section is going to be Section 2. Section 2 has updated policies that may include updates that are strictly of an administrative nature, new legal references or footnotes, but they also have some policies that have some other language suggestions. Those were the 6 that I had mentioned that Franzik has reviewed and created some recommendations for us that have been included in the board materials. This is our largest section of policies for consideration. There are 28 policies for review. As I just stated, not all of these have significant changes that affect the way the policy is currently being interpreted. There are only 6 policies in this section that have language changes that are being recommended by the district's legal counsel. As with Section 1, I'm happy to answer any individual questions that you might have. But as Julie had mentioned, the policies that had review by our district council are designated by saying Franzik reviewed.
And I think they did, and they always do a really good job with rationale and explaining. There were a few that I wasn't tracking, though, and one of them it's number 5, the policy 4140, the waiver of student fees. Just that first bullet, I wasn't clear on why they're making a recommendation for the language change. They were just saying what it should be, but not why they're recommending that.
Absolutely.
Which one is that, Jill?
Policy 4140, waiver of student fees. It's about when students are eligible and when that falls away and when it doesn't.
Yeah, so 140.
Sorry if I jumped ahead.
Absolutely.
which subpart of 4140 or the whole thing?
Well, just that first bullet in their notes, they're recommending a
in
language
the
change that,
Frantic memo?
yes.
No.
Sorry, they're recommending a language change, and I wasn't tracking the rationale, why.
Not press's comments.
No, Frantic, sorry.
We could certainly get clarification on it, absolutely.
Didn't mean to confuse the issue.
Absolutely. Are you referring to the part where it's talking about students being exempted from certain things?
Yeah, they're just saying the sentence should read, but they weren't saying why it was, at least I wasn't tracking why they felt that it wasn't accurate. And then most of the time, they give the rationale. It's either redundant with another policy, or we have an existing agreement that is, the standing agreement before what the policy is. So there's usually rationale, but I wasn't tracking it here.
Isn't Frantic just recommending that we add, kind of right in the middle of that first bullet, the quote, "unless otherwise permitted to be changed by law"?
Yeah.
No, but I don't know what does that mean?
Oh, that's your question. Okay.
Yeah, like why? What is, I don't want loopholes. That's kind of what I was just reading it as.
The way this policy currently would read, based upon the changes, is that you would strike out that pink section that says no student, including a student eligible for a fee waiver, is exempt from charges or fines. So that's what press is recommending we remove from that. So I think we should get some clarification from Frantic, but my thought is that gives us a little more flexibility in certain situations.
That's good. That's what I was hoping.
Yep.
I didn't want it to be the opposite, where kids get dropped when we need them to stay, right? So,
That's a good one to get clarification on, for sure.
No.
I'm going to stand down for a
Really, the
few
question
minutes.
is, what benefit does that language, unless otherwise permitted to be charged by law, what does that?
Maybe an
Provide.
example. I
Yep.
think, it's saying, the language, I think the language that our attorneys have recommended that we add sounds like it gives the school permissibility to charge fees, where if we left it off, we would have a stricter interpretation. So I'd be curious, what's an example of a situation where, despite how the sentence reads, we would actually be permitted to charge fees?
Yeah.
And then maybe an
Under
extension.
what law?
What do we do in the past? What have we done in the past?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can certainly get information from Frantic.
Ed, I had a question under Title IX, because that's come up, and I know we looked at that, again, that was over 2 years ago, I believe.
Correct.
We looked at all that with all those changes that were going on. And I just wanted to know if, and this is where I get a little confused, because I know we have like work harassment section, that's a different policy, and how those things get related, and so I wanted to make sure that this 2265, there wasn't anything in there that affects anything else that we have in the, in some of the other policies, like that 7765 or something.
720 and
Seven-
520, right. Those-
720 student policy, yeah.
Right, there are no changes. This is one that I was when I was speaking before about policies that have cross-references with other policies. The biggest reason for this being reviewed by Frantic and their recommended changes come from changes that were necessitated to Board Policy 5120, which is the Employee Code of Professional Conduct. That has a reference to the Title IX Sexual Harassment Complaint Policy. So because there were substantial changes to 5120, in fact, it was rewritten, and there is a reference to this, we wanted Frantic to review. So their recommendation is adopting the proposed changes that reference to the new Board Policy 5120, which we'll talk, that's actually Section 3 that we're going to talk about. But then as part of Illinois Public Act, there have been changes to the definition of dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking from the Violence Against Women Act, which was just reauthorized and updated in 2022. So those are those updates to legal reference.
Okay.
In terms of how the policy is interpreted, how we operationalize that policy, there are no recommended changes to that. The big recommendation is that it relates to or has a cross-reference to Section 5120, which is the big policy in this press issue.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this wasn't one of those, that anything in it, or maybe that we hadn't updated from that time 2 years ago that should have been.
No, absolutely, no, that policy is up to date.
Okay. But then I have a couple other questions.
Go on, yeah.
Keep going, right? I told you guys I was reading a lot over the holidays. And then I guess the next question I was going to look at for policy 410, where it added, including the cash reserve balance of all funds held by the district related to its operational levy. This is something we do.
That's actually, so we did that during our budget hearing this year.
Okay.
And we did it during our levy hearing this
Yeah.
year. So this is just catching up with that.
Okay.
So that law became effective, it was sometime last year in '22, so we
Okay.
were required to do it this year, and this is just catching up with that.
Okay, and I just wanted to verify that. The one that I was just talking about?
Yeah.
410. 410. Fiscal and business management. Okay. All right, cool. Thanks, Brian. I thought so, and I figured you would be able to answer that. And then, let's see. I did have another question on policy, back to the workplace harassment prohibited, 520. So in this one, what actually really triggered it for me was a memory point from back when we had discussion about similar policies again, 2 years ago, is that it lists our complaint coordinators, I believe, or complaint managers.
Correct.
And I know the last time we did have female representation, and I know here we just have our 2 assistant principals.
We use the associate principal.
So is there a way we can add or find a representative to list that would be female?
We certainly could. It's important to note that it's those people or designees, so we can certainly
Right.
designate.
I know, I just,
Absolutely.
I feel like there might be some benefit to that, to having someone listed that way. And I do know that you guys would refer and have gone through the process of making sure that if it's sensitive subject matter, that
Absolutely.
we use trusted individuals for any of our students, employees, staff, what have you, so,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you.
And the policy does allow an employee to choose to report to a person of the same
Right.
gender, but your point is, let's make it more explicit,
I
a little
think
more
so.
inviting, or...
Yeah. A little more comprehensive.
Comprehensive.
Yes, it provides some options, I think
I
that'd be
would worry if somebody was going to go, like, would it already be a level of, like, I don't want to say harassment, but another barrier
helpful. Right, don't want to put any
to
barriers to
not
that.
report, because that's who you have to go to. But if you had an option,
Yep, great.
Fantastic. Okay, and then, under 220 substitute teachers, short-term substitute teachers, I see this is new here.
Correct.
This seems like it's all new verbiage. Is that some different designation? Is that something new that we have
That's a
never had
state,
before?
yeah, that is a state designation. Recently, the state has allowed for a short-term substitute license, which allows people who may not meet those requirements for substitute teachers to get a substitute license in a different way. And that just has school district requirements if school districts are going to engage in that. But that is something that is consistent across the state.
Got it. Cool, thank you.
the one question, do we use it?
We have not had any applicants that have applied through that short term.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not, it doesn't, at this point in time, it's not impactful.
Correct. Should we be in that need, we would certainly follow those requirements. There's different, like, training requirements that are part of them.
You'd be equipped for that if necessary.
Yeah, we would work with our intermediate service center, which is West 40, to provide any of that training or get any of those resources that need to be.
Have we gotten to the one that they've completely rewritten?
Not yet. That is section 3.
Where's which one's here?
Because there's notes here in the second section, but yeah, okay. I'm just gonna stay here.
I have some more questions somewhere too.
Carrie, does your comment about the designees apply to some of the other one, like policy 7180?
Yeah, I think that is what, I was trying to do my best to go back and forth between them, but I think, yeah, I feel like anywhere where we talk about complaint managers, it would be helpful to make sure we have that updated so it reflects the other.
Absolutely, right. And those are all through cross-references that.
Right. Thank you, Julie, yes. Trying to see if I'm still in the section 2. Yeah.
Wait, Carrie, where were you talking about the complaint managers? Where was the next?
So Al, that was in 520, workplace harassment.
No, but did you just mention a different one?
Julie did. She mentioned
180.
7180, yes. Response to bullying, intimidation, and harassment. Yep.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yep. I think I just wanted a little more clarity too and discussion around policy 6310, credit for alternative courses and programs and course substitutions. The dual credit courses part, I wanted to understand a little bit more behind what they're recommending here, that and how that would be implemented, or an example of how we might use that.
We currently do this and have done this throughout, so I don't know if this, I don't know the specific reference, because there doesn't seem to be it's 51020.62. I can look at it in more detail, but there are some colleges that don't allow anyone to be in a course that's dual credit who isn't earning the dual credit, but we've found that then limits our ability to run dual credit programs, so you're allowed to have students in the course that don't qualify for the criteria, maybe they don't have the prerequisite or something like that.
Oh.
We just have to inform that student that they're not eligible for dual credit, and we've done that. I was surprised to see it written.
Yeah.
But it's great. I mean, it's good to know, so. I think what it does is it allows us to run more dual credit, because there were, at one time, years ago, only the kids who were getting dual credit could be in the class, which meant we either had to run 2 sections or not run dual credit.
So, do you think, is it pretty common then for us to have students that would be in there that are not? No. Yeah. At the end of the day, right, most of the kids that are there will receive dual credit for.
Yeah, because this is really a community college corollary. The ones that aren't community college, like at Indiana University, you have to have the prerequisite or you're not allowed in there.
Okay.
But these are the community college ones, so.
Bless you.
That community college.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
I'm sure it has something to do with the overall, they did a lot of the dual credit. Illinois Community College Board.
Like, I'd like to see on the flip side, like how, what the accountability they have back to our high school students for that as well. Okay.
For policy 6260, complaints about curriculum, instruction materials, and programs. For a process, I know there's a process if there's a complaint regarding books, from a, summer reading perspective in the library. But are we formalizing a process for any kind of objections as it relates to curriculum and any aspect that a parent may have in instructional materials?
So this policy just changes persons to basically residents, parents, employees, and community members, but it doesn't outline an actual process. Yeah.
But do we have a process that we have in place for that?
Yeah, the process, if the complaint is either brought to the teacher or to myself, it goes to the chair for review. And then from there, there's a dialogue and a discussion of an alternate assignment. And that is at the chair level.
Okay.
We are also working on a procedures manual, so we'll make sure that, again, those types of forms and things are all easy.
What do you mean by a procedure? Just for this or for all procedures in general?
All procedures.
So it's consistent?
That's also an IASB feature, resource that they provide. So basically, they can take all of our policies and create internal procedures manuals. So we're on the docket to get that in place.
And they'll address this.
Matches our practice and whether we want to modify theirs or.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That will also really allow us to take a look at all of our internal procedures currently and update them.
Is there a timeline on that? Because that sounds great.
We're currently working with them to establish, they have procedures for every board policy, not every policy not every policy that IASB has, our policy is a policy that we have in our board policy manual. So the first thing that we're doing is going through and cross-referencing which policies do we have in our board policy. There are certain things, for instance, that are related to elementary schools, right? Or policies that aren't applicable to us. And then we go through and when we're prioritizing which are the ones that we have to have those procedures in place, which are which are the have-to-haves in place, and then priority to which would be. As you can tell by the sheer number of policies that we have, the procedures, some of these policies have multiple procedures and exhibits, so that's a much lengthier process.
To your point, Joe, they'll create a draft manual to deliver to us, and then we can review that, compare it to our current existing procedures, and tweak it, yeah.
That sounds great.
Prior to going to this process, our policies and procedures manual was merged, and it was a beast.
Thousands of pages.
That was something you engaged on at the end of last year, right?
Back in the
And you
summer.
came to the board and said you were going to do it, and that's what you're describing as that work that you started post that, yeah. Which again, it's same thing as like kind of how I feel about the press manual. It makes it so more methodical and easier to just stay on top of all of these, and especially as they change too. So that's great that you guys are doing that. You all are doing that.
For this policy 6260 with the verbiage change, is that just to be more specific, so making sure it's all people connected to the district? Yeah, that's what I
That's how
thought.
I interpret it.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Just for my education, question on policy 7:50. The student admissions, it makes reference to, the residency policy that's separate, and then it lists some subcategories like homeless children, foster care students, foreign students, transfers, and it made me think about, I don't even know to the extent we have any migrant students, do they fall into one of those existing categories?
They would.
Related to that, actually, Julie, I had a question on that same policy, but also on 7250, where it suggests that the district provides a liaison to facilitate and communicate with the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Is that somebody we already have that does do that, or is that fully new? Because I wasn't sure.
And 7250, Carrie?
Yeah, it's in both 7250 and then in 750. There's mention of this liaison to facilitate the enrollment transfer of records and students in legal custody of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. So I was wondering who does that? Like, is that, do we have somebody who already has to do that
We
now?
do have people that serve as our homeless liaisons through the McKinley-Vento Act. I don't know if Jen, I think it's our associate principals that act.
Okay, as the
They would
liaison.
work as the liaison.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about policy 7285 related to anaphylaxis prevention, response, and management. Is this something that we currently have in terms of, are we doing all of this? right now? Yes, Leslie? When it says things like providing in-service training, ensure staff members receive appropriate training, how does it delineate which, like, it's not very specific about who the staff is that would receive that training?
With our health offices, we have an emergency action plan for any student who affects us, so those emergency plans are provided to the teachers and staff that would be working, provided directly to that staff. That's how we've done it in the past.
So any students rotating through any of our campuses and any of our teachers each year get training if they're going to have a student in class who has life-threatening allergies?
And they get the emergency action plan. That is an update that happens every year with the student's physician and family, and then that's all provided, obviously confidentially, but with the staff so they know exactly the steps. Some students, they may carry or something like that, so they are aware of what they have, and then our nursing staff has other medications sometimes that they're able to administer depending on the situation.
And I didn't have a chance to cross-reference this to the other one, but there's another policy that references the school's, I don't want to say responsibility because I can't remember if it's mandated, but I think it's a suggestion, or if maybe it is a mandate that we carry a certain amount of epinephrine auto-injectors. Is it a mandate that we
have a standing order. Dr. Harrison provides an order to our nurses to have the doses of the like EpiPens, and so we are able to, we call it undesignated medication, and so we do have a certain amount of that undesignated medication to be used if it's a life-threatening situation. Students who have life-threatening allergies, typically, again, their doctor's orders and working through our health office, they have a store of the medication that they need in the health office. So the undesignated is truly if it's a reaction, something's happening, and they are assessed to need that medication. And it may be a student who doesn't have an emergency action plan. It could be a new situation. But yes, we have orders for that, and they do carry that.
Also, Dawn, in addition to these teachers who may have a student in class, all staff, it's part of the Global Compliance Network training that all staff have to complete as well, is a module on anaphylaxis.
Okay, good. Yeah. Thank you.
We can move on to section 3. This is the policy I think you're referring to, Jill. This is policy 5120, which is titled Employee Ethics and Code of Professional Conduct and Conflict of Interest. This is a policy that has not only been reviewed by our legal counsel, but also rewritten as well. The reason for these changes, especially for this policy, relate to changes in school code and public act. Part of these changes in public act and school code require schools to modify existing employee codes of professional conduct, and if schools didn't have them in the past, to create those policies and create those codes. By having our existing policy 5120, we are in compliance with the law. This policy is being phased in, or the requirements of the law have been phased in at different times. There was the initial phase-in in 2022, and then another wave of items being phased in by July 1st of 2023, which includes handbook references, different things, reporting on websites, things along those lines. But as there have been changes to Public Act and Illinois School Code, this is something that was included not only in the press issue 110, but also reviewed by Franzic for them to take a look at. Not only what are those statutory requirements for what should be included in that employee code of professional conduct, but then also recommended changes that they think would be best for our school district, knowing us. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If there's things that I can't answer, we can certainly. This is a very significant change because it has been significantly rewritten, as you can tell. And an updated copy, and it has been changed so much that after being sent to the Board of Education, there were additional recommendations that just missed that initial run right before winter break. But we sent that out to the board, and there's with those comments.
I think that was helpful context because a lot of I wasn't, and what I said up front, sometimes they were noting like, oh, it's just stylistic and it doesn't change it, and so we tracked that rationale, but then it was see track changes, but I didn't see a lot of rationale in the comments for track changes, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
The majority of these changes, well, I won't even say the majority, all of these changes are necessitated by Illinois School Code and Public Act, and what requirements school districts have for these codes of professional conduct, employee ethics, and then conflict of interest. The changes that Franzik is recommending, those changes, those recommendations don't take away from what those statutory requirements are. This policy, whether we adopt it straight as press is recommending, or with the Franzik recommendations, meet what our requirements are, and it just specifies, and for instance, when it's talking about identifying appropriate employee conduct standards, you'll see what has been crossed out. Those were the same general things. They may have just been reworded by press or by Franzik, but they cover the same topics. Sure. And this is one that does have a lot of cross-references to other policies as well.
Yeah, that helps. So wait, that was at our table. Is this replace what was in this?
Yes, that is the most updated.
Just making sure.
The changes that are on this one are very, very minimal. Essentially just some language that Franzik had originally thought about removing. But it was very, very small things.
Okay.
So once this.
I was just going to ask if there's any significance to the color coding or just, okay.
I think it was just help us to see it so we don't get bleary-eyed. But I'm sure that didn't help. At least it didn't help for me. Michael, did you have a
Uh-oh, he's got a frown.
Once it's approved, does this go into the employee handbook?
So there isn't a specific employee handbook. We do have collective bargaining agreements, so if applicable, it would be in there. But part of this policy talks about notification of staff of this policy. So we've done that similarly with other policies. For instance, when we created an electronic communication policy, we then notified all staff members of that policy, sent them a copy, made them aware of the board actions. We would be doing a very similar thing. There's also procedures that go along with it. You see that it talks about establishing, the appropriate employee conduct standards and guidelines for like transportation and working with students. Those are all things that are procedural that we would then share out with staff and make sure that all staff members, regardless of work group, would be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then there's also, to further add to that, there is requirements for information in student handbooks as well too. So that would be references in there.
Okay.
I tried, and I'm a little lost with the track changes, and I'm usually pretty good at this stuff. So maybe just a conceptual question. What's in the book that shows no track changes?
The track changes were behind that initial one in
Right,
the
but
book, and then the one at your desk
Is the newest.
which was also emailed to you on the 23rd.
Yep.
So the one on the 23rd is the same as the one at your desk and is different than the one in that book.
And so, thank you. Maybe an easy example, like when Franzik refers to, we recommend adopting the proposed change to the title of the policy. I can't, is the way to try to understand what are the proposed changes from ISB, not ISB, IASB, the red font?
Right, that's what they added. The previous board policy related to the title just said employee ethics, conduct, and conflict of interest. But because of the new requirements in the Public Act, and Illinois School Code talks about specifically Code of Professional Conduct. That's where that put that
Yep.
change into it, right? So they are proposing that recommended change to the title based on Preston's recommendation.
And I'm looking, thank you for that, looking more for like the tool as to how to tell what the proposed changes from the, I'll just say the state were. So I see red in the title, but then I only see red minimally afterwards, I think because Franzik then commented on them, so I can't tell what they're referring to in their second bullet in the Franzik memo.
If it's more helpful, I can tomorrow or later tonight, send you side by side what the original Press 110 recommendations from IASB were.
With theirs, just.
Right, and then with this again, just so that you can have them
That
both
would
in the
help.
same.
I feel like I don't have my trail.
I understand. what you're
Quite
saying.
yet, because Franzik then commented, so again, just like, I think that will solve it, but like when they're saying, we recommend adopting a portion of the proposed language in the second paragraph of the policy. I think it's the one that's like purple and pink.
Correct.
But if I had, Marilyn, what you described, then.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, because that is more
Originally?
confusing, because I think that Franzik chose a different, the
Yes.
colors, and then they may have bled over with what the, because Press highlights for us in the red and the green, like you see in the rest of your packet, and then because of this being purple and pink with the red, I think that that's what's causing
Okay.
the confusion.
Yep. And then even just the giant section that, the 1, 2, 2A, 2B, 2C, 3, 4, looks like it's all been replaced, but it's really minimal probably for
It
within
is,
there.
right.
Okay.
It's rewording, it's formatting, all of those strike-throughs that are below, if you look, you can pretty
Match
much
them back
find
up, okay. I'm happy to follow the trail. I just think I was
Absolutely.
missing something.
Yeah, that's the biggest group is really that rewriting changes, that bulleted list.
Okay. And then I'm going to use tonight's version, hard copy, as the most current, with the Franzik's current recommendation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that will clear it up for me as well, because just as a for instance, I'm looking at point in their rewrite. So the rewrite is back in the very beginning, or not the rewrite, in the draft updates, where they go through all of their changes, all of the things that they're recommending and not recommending. I'm just looking at point 7, their bottom bullet point that says, "We do not recommend adopting the proposed language under the guidance counselor gift ban section." I have no, I keep looking for it, and I don't even know if it's here, right? Is that what I'm missing? Like, if you send the press update, Marilyn?
Well, I'll download it directly from Press, the recommendations, and then I'll send it all to you in one email with that designated.
Okay.
And then along with this, and then you would probably be able to see the difference, if that makes sense. I think that the coloring, I think Julie kind of hit the nail on the head, that,
Yeah, I don't know what is what.
right.
And so if it's here, I'm trying to figure out what language they're saying that they don't want us to adopt. I don't really even see any language there that is.
As it relates to
Here, but they don't, there's no change in language that I can see here.
Yeah.
the only change for the Counselor Gift Ban Act is just an update to Illinois School Code.
Oh, that's what it is.
Accordance
Right,
with
in accordance
105.
with.
Got it.
ILCS, which is Illinois School Code legislation, that had references to Counselor Gift Ban Act, so that is what it's saying. Franzik is saying we don't need to have any additional language, it's saying we just need to have it in accordance with 105 ILCS.
Got it, okay.
Right, but when Marilyn sends it out, you'll be able to see those.
Okay, perfect.
That one's a doozy.
This is why we do the readings.
Absolutely.
There's no way you could do this in one.
But you want to?
Absolutely.
There.
And then finally, Section 4. Section 4 are policies that may be part of Press 110, and just as part of their regular press review. But the common thread through all of them is that these policies have references to collective bargaining agreements. That is something that currently exists in our board policies. We have board policies that have very specific language that says, please see collective bargaining agreement with Lyons Township High School Education Association or Paraeducator Association, SEIU. Our current language in our current board policies lists a very specific collective bargaining agreement where applicable, because not every collective bargaining agreement is the same. There are certain provisions in some collective bargaining agreements that there aren't in others, whether we're talking certified staff, classified staff, different things that have been included. What Press did as part of their collective bargaining agreement review is they began to use blanket language. The press updates include the language which made reference to the possibility of collective bargaining agreements, but they would use the phrase at the very beginning of the policy, please refer to the applicable collective bargaining agreement or agreements, followed by the general statement, for employees not covered by a current applicable collective bargaining agreement, and then here's the whole policy. In reviewing that, we felt that that was far too ambiguous. We asked Franzik to review it. They felt the same way because an individual staff member may not know if this policy has applicability to their collective bargaining agreement. District Council felt it was much more appropriate to use the language that we currently use where we specify the specific collective bargaining agreement. For instance, if we are talking about at-will employees, that doesn't include certified staff who are part of our teaching or administrative team. So we would not want to have a blanket statement in that policy. We would have a statement that says, please refer to Lyons Township High School Paraeducator Association, or something like that, if we're talking about classified staff, for instance. So all of those policies, from policy 510 to policy 830, are all policies, there are 13 of them, that do refer or could refer to collective bargaining agreements in some way, shape, or form. In some of the Franzik recommendations, they're saying, yes, we agree, put that language in, but you make it the specific language that we are talking about, specifically related to or specifically identifying the collective bargaining agreement. And in others, they are saying, no, take that language out. We've reviewed your collective bargaining agreements. Your CBAs do not have anything that relates to this policy. Adding that blanket language in would be confusing because it's essentially pointing someone in a direction where we know nothing exists. So that is the reason for all of those changes in section 4. And it's just to maintain consistency with what we have. Obviously, collective bargaining.
And
yes.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. So that statement at the beginning of all of those is going to stay in, or that's going to come out? No,
that statement, Allison, would be leaving. We felt, and District Council felt, that blanket statement was far too ambiguous, and we would opt for a much more specific statement about the actual collective bargaining agreement that is being referred to.
Got it.
Do we currently do that
Yes.
under our policy pages? So it's really not, we're just not accepting.
Yeah, we are essentially keeping it the way that we
have it. Okay, that's helpful.
Franzik may reword it a little bit, but the spirit of what they are doing remains the same.
And we don't have that language in our materials then, right? Unless I'm, again, misunderstanding, maybe I could look at the second policy as an example, where in the Franzik memo, we do not recommend adopting the changes, because it sounds like none of the CBAs have such language.
Right.
So when we look at 5140 and we see the green in the beginning, we're just verbally agreeing that those two green sentences will come out.
Yeah, let me just get to 5.1. Correct. That is correct. That would just completely come out. And if it is a policy that does have applicability with one of our existing CBAs, it would be replaced with, please refer to the, collective bargaining agreement with Education Association or SEIU, whatever that.
But that's work that, I'm just trying to refresh, that's work that you will do outside of this meeting. Like, you won't come back to us with those two phrases stricken.
Well, yes, that would be part of it. And within the Franzik memo, it does say, please, we would replace it with this language, right? But,
Yeah, okay.
So for the second reading, are we going to see that then?
We could ask Franzik to.
Remember how we handled all these yes, no's from before with Franzik? I'm not trying to, not trying to create additional.
From my standpoint, I think we should be reviewing it. I mean, this is a recommendation, and if we're not objecting to that, and if we're going to proceed with that, we should be recommending or reading it in each of our readings closer, and the final one is what we're approving.
Yeah, that's, I think, what we did before.
I think we did that.
Yeah, okay.
We could certainly do that.
And then, how do you, sorry, real quick, how do you manage that? That's a lot to, like, do you have a matrix somewhere, like a grid of the CBAs and these topics? Seriously, because sometimes the forensic memo says, you don't have this today in your CBA, but, so therefore let's remove any references, but let's say it comes into the next one that's negotiated. How will you remember to catch it and flag it for the next time we update the policy? Ugh. It just sounds daunting.
It is a lot, I mean, to start with that first part of that question, a lot of it is just from knowledge of those CBAs, whether it's knowledge of language that, I'm working with the different groups, or Brian from the financial side, or, anybody else who has areas within the CBA that they are responsible for will generally know, I know that solicitations from staff, I know there's nothing in the CBAs about it.
Yeah.
We've negotiated enough that we've seen that, or we would have seen it, and it doesn't ring a bell. But we do review the CBAs just to see if something would come up.
Okay.
Down the road, if we were to add something in, we would work with legal counsel.
Yeah,
and say,
okay.
Could this have board policy implications? And then we would make those.
And initially, I loved the language because it seemed so clear, like, go read the CBA if it applies, and if it doesn't, read here. But the enforceability or the practicality of every time you have to refer to the policy and somebody's got to go look up. So I like the route.
And we felt the same way too, that statement made it clear, and I think that may be what IASB was thinking.
Sure.
It just makes it clear, it's one-stop shopping, but it can also create confusion if you're looking for something and board policy says it's there. It might not necessarily
You're looking
be there.
forever, you're going to
If applicable, right? I mean, people are still.
I was going to say, in that one that Julie's talking about, 5140, there's a typo.
Okay.
That was the last sentence, there's like the S is not attached to it.
We will make the change.
5140, you said?
Yes. A solicitation and then S, space S for such activities.
Okay. Absolutely.
And it wasn't intense to add as everybody else, but I just wanted to be noted.
Absolutely. I know there was a lot tonight, so thank you very much. If any questions do come up, please don't hesitate to let us know. We will begin working with legal counsel to get any clarifications that were asked for, as well as to work with them to get some of that language about the new language in this.
Great.
This will come up again in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn, for putting all this together, too, before the holidays. That was helpful.
And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Marilyn. As with this, not only
Chasing a
with
lot of
this
that stuff
policy,
down, yeah.
but every press issue in the past and moving forward, she's been great.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll move on to curriculum, where we have one agenda item to review under curriculum. It's the first reading of the textbook adoptions. Scott Eggerding.
All right, so you can all jump right ahead to page 143. And then I've got quite a few pages in here as well. This is our first reading of the requests that have been brought forward from the division chairs. Our annual review of textbooks is really ongoing, and as we've begun even with our curriculum review, there's some talk of perhaps making changes going forward, which is really what should happen during a review, right? So one of the things that we do, and I know we're rather unique in this, is we still have what are called district texts, and those are books that we purchase as a district and then hold on to for multiple years. Students use them, and then 1 year, and then another student uses the same book the next year, and on and on. Most schools have gone to a more college or collegiate model, which is you buy all your books every year, and then at the end of the year, if you can sell them, great. If not, you buy all your next books the next year. So what we have done over the years is we have instituted just a flat textbook fee, those for the district texts, and then we also have what are called the class sets. Class sets are books that we purchase and that the students use, similar to the district text, but they're not distributed through the bookstore. They're kept in a department or division. Often they're novels. Or what's been more common lately has been if there's a digital version of a text, we have a hard copy in the classroom, or the students take the hard copy home as the class set versions, and then use the digital. So you'll see that in some of these requests. Our consumables are things that our students pay for, and we do not collect back. Again, novels, workbooks, those types of things. So you have in the cover sheet here sort of a history since 2014 of what these annual new text requests have been. It sort of is in a range, but really the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 since 2014 have been in that little over $100,000, under $170,000 range. And again, we try to make sure we're doing things cyclically so that we can budget a little better. That being said, all it takes is one book, and for a lot of kids, and we're spending a lot of money. So that's always a challenge that we look at as well. One of the ways that we're able to keep that fairly consistent is a 5-year adoption minimum, unless there are some extenuating circumstances, and you'll see that we have a few of those this year, but they really don't amount to a tremendous amount of money. That being said, we really need to take a look at a few of them and not keep them the full 5 years for a couple different reasons. I'll go to those in a little more detail. We have certainly been looking at ways that we can lower costs. I know a lot of the students have mentioned wanting everything on the Chromebook. We've looked a lot at how we can do that. For a number of reasons, we've not gone in that direction unless they're both available. For some students, reading on a device is not as effective. There are research studies about reading on a device activates a different portion of the brain than reading a paper copy of a book. Some students need that paper version, some don't. So we try to balance that. We've also investigated a little bit on what are called open source textbooks. An open source textbook is a textbook where it's something anyone could get for free on the internet. It doesn't go through the normal vetting process of a textbook. Sometimes they do, but not always. It doesn't come with many of the other supports and ancillary materials. That being said, sometimes they are better options. So we keep looking at ways that we can go in that direction, and in some of our discussions with our freshman year curriculum review, we are looking at vetting some of those types of texts. All that being said, what we're looking at today is a first reading, and so you'll see this again next month. As I mentioned, the two that we're looking to make a change to that are not 5 years old, one of them is the German AP course. This is a relatively small number of books. It's a relatively low enrollment class, so it's not going to affect us financially significantly. The irony here is the new book that we got 3 years ago doesn't match the new AP test, so we are adopting a book that's a little bit older than the one we have now that does match the AP test. So that being said, we don't see that being a significant change, and it makes sense so that the students are prepared for that German AP test. The French shift is really a long-term conversation we've been having since we've been working with Indiana University and our Advanced College Project, or ACP. What we're finding is we were actually doing more in our early French classes, but not to the same depth that Indiana was looking for. So the teachers are saying, let's slow some things down and go a little deeper and just roll these books forward a little bit. So instead of doing books 1 and 2 before you start French ACP, let's really do the French 1 book very clear before they start the ACP, and then move the 2 book to after the Indiana University class. So I thought that made sense, and so that's why that's here as well. Other than that, we have in the the charts, it gives you a sense of the district purchase texts and class sets. That's sorted really for financial reasons. I'm going to take a look at the divisional cost summary because I think it gives you a better sense of what's being changed. So that would be on page 147. Language arts is at the top. We've had a book in English 1 honors, progressions for writers, that we want to move into English 2 honors. We're making a change there and dropping Tale of Two Cities. It's a book that's been taught for a long, long time in English 2 honors. But it's also a very long book, and we're seeing that students are doing a lot of novel reading and not enough writing. And so the idea there is to take out a very long novel and put in a longer writing unit. So that's what's happening with English 2 honors. If you recall, English 2 honors is only a semester long because they have interpersonal communications for the other semester, and the teachers felt this was the time to really provide a little bit more writing since they're getting a lot of speaking and listening in the second semester. The other changes in English have to do with visual word. They want to add in the Heights. That's a very popular visual. They just made a movie out of it. If you're a Hamilton fan, written by the same composer, author, so you'll see that there. They're dropping One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They've found that it's not as kids don't connect to it as well. It's also in the Heights gives us an opportunity to have a little more culturally responsive pedagogy, right? So. That one seems to make a whole lot of sense. The English 4 literature of comedy, one of the things we've been trying to do in our English classes is to give students more choice. This stack of books right here are all literature that is humorous. Now, everybody has their own opinion of what humor is, but the number one knock against any English program is it's all depressing, and so these are all not. And so this will give students also an opportunity to do some independent and some choice based on their interests. Also allows us to expand some of the culturally responsive opportunities for kids. So those are the big changes in English. Any questions on English?
Questions for writers that you're moving into English 2 honors. Is it going to stay in English 1 honors?
No, it'll go in English 2 honors.
It's moving from 1 to 2. Okay.
And Scott, all those English, books like in the Heights, those are all for class texts, or are those individuals for the?
In the Heights is for visual word is a class set. So there'll be 20 of those. They'll be watching the movie because that's visual word is a film as literature class. So they'll have an opportunity to analyze scenes with the book in the classroom. For the other ones through the literature of comedy, those are consumables. The students pay a flat fee of $15, and then when they get to that unit, they pick the book they want. Bookstore orders them and then delivers them to the classroom.
Got it. Okay, I see.
Cool.
All right, moving into fine arts, especially world languages. The French, one of the things that they're looking to do with the French book, La Chaussettes de Tito, level 1, that's the worst French you're ever going to hear, but you get that for tonight. That's a level 1 reader that is actually written by a French teacher, not one of ours, but a French teacher. It's really designed for high interest reading for students at the very basic level. The 21 mini contes levels 1 and 2 is also by that same publishing group. It doesn't have an ISBN number because these are like self-created materials. It's a unique opportunity, but it gives students some high interest reading there. The D'accord 1 and 2, that's what we talked about, how we're moving the French level 1 book so that they can do it throughout also French 1 and 2. We also have some students who take French 1 prior to coming here, and it helps sort of level the playing field if they're all working out of the same book. And then moving that D'accord 2 to the French 4 Excel. Spanish, these are district texts that they're looking to bring in for that ACP class. One of the things with a dual credit course, especially through Indiana University, they don't have a 5-year rule for what they adopt, and they will often change curriculum on a whim. This is something they've added, so we need to add it as well, but we're able to drop something that we had. And then AP German is what I mentioned, making that shift, even though it's only been 3 years, to that new book. You'll notice that what we're doing here, it says 125. We only need 25 this year, but by purchasing it, you get the digital access for much cheaper for the years going forward. So we would have the hardback of Neue Blickwinkel in the classroom, and then for 5 years, the digital going forward. So we wouldn't actually be paying that $5,100 for access years 2 through 5 until you get to those years. But we're looking to just adopt it all right now, so we have that 5-year adoption, and it gives us a little bit of a discount going forward.
I have a question.
Sure.
I just am not understanding, I think, maybe when you're looking at AP German 4, when you're looking at enrollment at 100, so it's a district text, the district text, you have enrollment of 100 and enrollment of 25. Is that was because?
Yeah, so that was what I was mentioning. We don't even have 25 in that class. So for the first year, we're going to buy the hardback book and the 1-year digital access, which is the $133.90 for 25 enrollment. The next year, we would only need to spend $51 for the digital access.
It's all tied together with the digital access.
And then 25, and then 25, and then 25. So it's 125, but it's 5 years.
So some of the costs in your summary are not for the next year.
Right, this is one of those unique ones where
You
they're
front load it and pay a little bit more the first year, and then it's, okay.
Oh, okay, so you do pay them first.
We are paying for it, though, this cycle.
Utilize in future years.
And
That, and I know you touched on this with the trying to get away from the textbook, but, and I understand how, like, Indiana, they have a different set of rules on what textbooks to go for. Are these kids, though, are we using those textbooks, or do we just have to have them available?
No, we use them. In fact, our teachers for the Indiana programs have to go to Bloomington each year and go through training with all the other high school teachers teaching the university courses throughout Indiana and Illinois. So yeah, it's all used.
Okay.
And the French, Decor 1 and 2, the workbooks that are moving along with those, are those things that we would be bringing in every year because the workbooks are not used again? They're used once per each student, and then?
Yeah, those are consumables, so those will be purchased each year. They're included in the cost here just so you know how much they are, but the students actually pay for it. So in the summary, when I say what our district costs are, it's only the things that the district is paying for, not what we're going to be charging students for.
Those two particular textbooks have a 3-year life cycle instead of a 5-year?
Well, we had adopted those, we had Decor 1 for French 1, Decor 2 for French 2. We're now moving French 1, and then 2 to the French 4.
But it's also like, it's a new book this year?
The book will be the same. It's just so to some degree, we may not need all 125, but we will need to purchase everyone who got one freshman year won't have one for sophomore year, so we'll have to purchase some more. So this would be based on the existing enrollment. I always like to estimate high, so we're hoping that everyone who's in French 1 stays for French 2. So that's what the numbers are based on, the enrollments.
I apologize if I missed it, but the Spanish 3 honors ACP, what is that?
That's something that is being added from Indiana University.
So whether it's AP, do I hear you correctly, that when we've got a situation like Indiana University with the ACP things come out more frequently than every 5 years, or with AP German, if the AP test has shifted and our materials aren't supporting the students who are trying to get college credit in that different venue, that we will be more, that we're responding and not just sticking with this, hey, we can only do it every 5 years. We're trying to be more responsive to the curriculum that's either mandated by Indiana University or the AP test.
Yeah, or COD, we've had changes from, like, we have some programming classes that'll change, C+ programming now has a new language where you can't program in the old version.
Sure.
You've got
Okay.
to go with the new one, so.
And with the French, I think I was hearing you say that, or maybe I'm interpreting a little bit, we've been doing ACP French for, I think this is probably the third year.
Yeah.
And are we seeing student performance maybe not where we'd like it to be for, say, French 3 ACP, and therefore we're digging in more deeply to some of, I don't know whether it's conjugation or grammar or whatever in the French 1 and 2 timeframes?
I saw it more as, there was a summer workshop for French this past summer, and the teachers who taught ACP had the chance to talk with the teachers who were teaching French 1 and 2.
Okay.
And they're saying, look, here's what they're expecting, and maybe we can slow down here and spend a little more time on these things. The perception that you're taking a college French course that you've got to be instantly fluent is not the case. But there are expectations of where students could be. We actually were moving kids a little faster, but not as deep through the early French.
Yep.
So that's the teacher's recommendation.
That makes sense from a French-speaking household. Not me, kids. That all makes sense. Great.
Moving into global studies, this is where, as I mentioned, sometimes one book can really knock your budget. Human Geography, A Spatial Perspective, the AP edition, is $184.50 a piece. This is where, if you've bought college books recently, this is normal. A college textbook is about $150 or more. This is a college course, an AP course, but we'll buy this book and hold on to it for 5 years rather than make every incoming freshman buy one of these.
Have we had it, this book? Is this?
This is a new book. It's replacing the book that we used to start the class. This one is more aligned to where the course is now.
We haven't had that course for 5 years now, have we?
Yeah, this is actually
5 years.
Yeah, right on 5.
Wow. Okay.
So this will be the 6th year coming in the fall.
Okay.
And that's a high enrollment number, too.
Yeah, that course has been steadily growing.
Yeah.
It's about a third of our freshmen take that course. But again, at $184.50, that's a $55,000. So if you look at our total estimated expenditure, nearly a third of it is for this book alone. So.
And to throw in Allison's question earlier about the foreign language books, when we bring in new textbooks, we're expecting the curriculum to be aligned through the textbook, use of the textbook. It's not just sitting there as a reference tool, right? It is.
Right.
It is. The course is aligned.
When they're used more as a reference, you're going to see them as a class set. So sometimes, like civics, that doesn't really have a textbook, but there are some tools in the classroom that teachers can use. So that's just, depending on how the course is set up.
And Scott, something like that again is check to see if there's online version or a Chrome version that might work as well, or.
Yes. That one, I can look to, before the second reading, to see, I believe that one has digital access, but I can double check.
Which book is that?
The AP Human Geography is a hardback book with digital access, so students can choose how they wish to do it.
I feel like last time we went through this stuff, the digital wasn't always less. It's
Well,
like a
the
package
textbook
sometimes.
companies seem to have figured out that they don't care whether it's a hardback or digital. And the other thing that colleges are what college students are starting to do, and you can do this through Amazon, you can rent a book. You can rent the digital copy for so many months. You can rent 4 chapters. So some students wait until they actually have to use the book and they rent those chapters. To your point though, Dawn, then you're not really integrating the book in with the curriculum and we'd much rather.
Yeah, I mean, and I get the class sets, and that's a good notation, because it is kind of curious sometimes when we have these courses, and there's this big, thick book that comes home, and it stays there the entire year. And then, it definitely makes you wonder, like, why do we have that book if it was, like, literally in a bookcase gathering dust the whole year, so.
Yeah, I've been encouraging, if teachers really want that model, that they keep those class sets in the classroom and then use them in the classroom and teach a student how to use the book. A lot of times they're going to go to that online source. Math is very common with that. The students will use the online textbook because they're going to go for the problem sets. That's the part that they're interested in.
A lot of our science books are the ones that typically, come home but gather dust.
Yeah, is there, so if there was an online option or a Chrome option for, let's say, that AP Human Geography, I mean, I guess there's no way to understand who's going to use the Chrome version and who's going to use the actual textbook.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could call it a deal that for $184.50 you get both. You get the digital version and the hard copy. But yeah, that's. I mean,
or maybe understanding, going forward, maybe surveying those kids and saying who's actually looking at a textbook versus using their Chrome on this, so that maybe I guess you'd have to buy the textbook to get the digital version. Is that what you're saying?
It depends. There's always packages, right? So if you buy this many hard copies and this many digitals, it'll be this much, that much. So a lot of times we let the divisions sort through that. I know that for this particular group, with incoming freshmen not knowing what their previous experiences were, they felt a hardback book was.
Got it.
But that would be kind of another interesting observation to see, like, and I'm sure you guys are doing this periodically checking, but maybe getting some kind of data that shows what percentage of our students are, for certain subject matters, have gone more digital, so that we can even maybe make some more efforts towards not having books sitting potentially, like you said. I have noticed for myself personally, I think I've seen that less and less, but I do know what you're saying. The one thing that seems to be really good are the binders, the size of the binders.
Well, and the workbooks seem to me, they would seem to be a perfect application for having an online version,
Yeah, as the support.
I'm kind of mixed on it, because I hate to ever, have a kid who thinks like, yep, I'm all online, and then they're struggling and we don't have a book. Maybe there's ways to trends over time.
Because I agree.
Really buying excess, because I'm also fiscally aware, but just try.
Some subjects just lend themselves probably better, like you said, to math, online than they do to.
As a parent at home, I'm always like, let me see your textbook so I can see what you're supposed to be doing. If you're having a problem, let me read the chapter real quick. But you could do it online too. In the college accounting, you'll notice that's this one, we have had dual credit with accounting through COD for a number of years. We have a new accounting teacher this year, and in his discussions with COD, COD has moved into this particular college accounting book and consumable, which is really the online application. Basically, all the accounting ledgers and everything are a part of a consumable, but it's digital. So that is a change. The recommendation is to have that book, and you notice there's 25 of those, so that's the class set of the college accounting book, and then 175 or 5 years worth of the actual workbook, basically, or what you're doing. So, and I apologize, that's actually 175 kids each year. So each student each year, we have about 175 doing that college accounting class. We have the hard copy book in the classroom, and then the students pay, basically that's the access to all the online book, ancillaries, worksheets, problem sets, the whole thing.
So the 17,500 is not in the cost to the district, it looks like?
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct. So I have a total there for that whole division, but the cost of the district takes out those things that are consumable.
17,500 is not to the district.
But
I was just doing,
What's that, Allison?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I interrupted somebody. Scott, I know we talked about before, and I'm not sure what the number, the limit was there, but I know we talked about having, that because it's $100 fee, which might be a lot for somebody to take on, is just to kind of have that in the I forget what it's called, the program book or whatever, talking about the classes, just to give people a heads up that there's an extra fee there. Do we do that, or can we do that?
We do not, because I guess the question is, what is the magic number? You're getting a college credit for this one, and so it is $100. There's an expectation that you're paying tuition. For these courses at COD, you don't. Brian Stashak and I have been talking about this, though, since last spring. That was that computer class we talked about. I believe that was like $120. And I have since pulled down from Infinite Campus all of the costs of all of our courses. So that's something I will be sharing with the board. We're going through that with the division chairs and just taking a look at those expenses and what's necessary. Couple of the requests that came through, for example, that we didn't bring forward right now, that we will when we get more in budgeting with Brian, have to do with costs of supplies. For example, our woodworking classes. Building materials prices went up. And the wood that's needed to do the advanced projects, sometimes kids don't want to use poplar, they want to use red oak. That costs significantly more. We want to be a little more transparent, especially with those, when it's not uncommon for kids to spend $300 for just the materials for a course, something like that. So we're putting that together, and we want to make sure that that's all a part of our budgeting, and then sharing that with not only you, but also with kids and parents. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those little shockers, it would just be great if they had a little, it's just a heads up.
Yep. I guess it's good, though. The most expensive thing is driver ed. We don't have any supplies more than a driver ed fee, and our driver ed fees are still below any private driving school. So, again, we try to provide as much value as possible.
Oh, yeah. It's just, again, it's a little heads up so that families know what they're getting into.
But we want to make sure we get all that together and shared before we ask them all to pay it. So, as far as special ed goes, this is a unique.
Did you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to piggyback on, I was going to say what Allison had said about the concern about the pricing. I know it was like it was back in the auditorium, and I don't remember we had discussed it, just to have some awareness, and how do we do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just so that no one has that sticker shock. Because I had a child that took woodworking, and it was like, what do you mean? Like, it was pricey. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's
and that one we
different things
have
like
had
that.
in the APG, but again, what is that number? We've been putting in that there are costs to some of our dual credit classes, but the colleges like to change that number in the summer. So again, we'll say there is a cost, there is a fee.
Could
Indiana
you put the consumable, like it uses the consumable cost for each?
We could,
So it's a full
again, that's.
disclosure? Why not?
Or range, I guess?
Yeah, it would be more like a range, because then it's going to matter pricing and whether, how our bookstore purchases things and what, all that.
not fixed and known at the time of publication, it sounds like.
But you could put a range, but I also would hate to have that, like, because I know we have things in place if a student couldn't afford it, that they would have that, but it would be more somebody that would be a shock by it.
Right.
I don't know the right answer, but I just, it's nice that we're all thinking about it and being thoughtful.
Or would make different choices maybe in their course selections based on some of those things.
Right, but if there's, a way to help a student that may not know because they would be afraid of the cost, that would be something you'd want to not have them
Yeah, I think as much
make that decision
information
based upon that. There was
upfront
support
would
for
be
it.
helpful, even if it's a range in some form. Okay.
The special ed request is a unique one, and essentially what they're suggesting, and you notice there's no cost to the district here, but because it's an adopted set of software, I included it. And partly I just wanted to recognize what they're looking to do. You'll notice with Math 1 and 2, Practical Math, and the Geometry Crosscat courses, they're going to be determining the individual needs of a student first, and then applying one of 3 software components or texts to that. All of these software pieces will be paid for by the district through grants and other things. So, when you look at how much it is, the cost per unit and the enrollment, this isn't a large number. But that being said, we just want to make sure, again, software and other things, any sort of textbook that we're vetting and that we're reviewing, and I just wanted to make sure, to clarify too, that I really like what they're doing here, in that Alex, IXL, and Delta Math can meet the needs of kids in different ways, and so giving those teachers those tools and the opportunity to do that with those 4 things, and you're here if you have anything you want to clarify.
It sounded great, thank you.
I think that's awesome.
Highlighting that, that's important.
And then student services is where our alt program lies. Our alt English class is there, and they're looking to add the book The Distance Between Us. They've had other books in that particular curriculum, so they're looking to add that one. And again, the enrollment is relatively small. It is a consumable, but that's also a part of the first read. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have, but you'll see this again next month. There will likely be additional changes in April, May that come through either changes at dual credit courses, or we might find that things are out of print between now and that basically mid-March. Our chairs will meet with our bookstore leaders and go through everything and say, look, this isn't being used, or this is being used, or this is out of print, and then we might have a few other changes. But for the most part, this would be what I'm expecting as the request.
You mentioned they'll be on display.
Yeah, so these books are here not just so I can prove to you I looked at them. They actually they actually will stay here throughout the month for the community to review. That's part of our policy for any new textbook adoption. And then I'll report on any feedback we've gotten from community review of those books. They'll be right here on the table, and people are welcome to come in and take a look at them.
When I looked through this, I guess I was thinking that I probably would see some changes to some of our freshman courses, knowing that the curriculum review is going on there, and really there's not much. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, we're early in that process. We're still aligning the standards to outcomes. We haven't looked at assessments and how those fit. And then actually part of the spring is reviewing the text, the materials. And we've asked those courses for the most part not to make changes this year until we go through that full process. So we are going to do a culturally responsive pedagogy inventory to take a look at those books in the spring, and not only the books, but ancillary materials and that sort of stuff. So I know math is considering an open source textbook. That's the one we were talking about. And then biology hasn't really had a textbook with our storylining process. A lot of discussion about how that fits. So those are all very fluid conversations, and we didn't want to put a deadline on that to make this process work.
So any changes that would be put into place then would not go into place next year?
It's possible they would be in that April, May, depending on what the decision would be. It's also possible that they would want a year of implementation prior to the discussion. So we're reviewing right now. We haven't made any changes. That change going forward, they may want to implement something and pilot something in the fall. I know that, again, the algebra group is considering that as a pilot.
So if outgrowth of that process lends itself to wanting to pilot or to even make a change for next year, would that just come back to us as an adjunct to what we're doing?
Right, so that would be that reserved April, May process. So the first read April, approval May, we can get things in for the
Okay,
summer.
excellent, because we're really, I mean, I appreciate this process, but we're not really bound to any strict regulatory timelines, other than you got to get the stuff on order, you've got to make the decisions.
Yeah,
There's room.
We need to have things on display for a month, that's
Yeah.
part of our policy, and for the purchasing power, you can get better deals earlier on, and we can also then purchase out of this school year's budget rather than next school year's budget, so there's some benefits to being out ahead of it.
Good, well, what I'm hearing ultimately is there's flexibility such that if, as we get a little bit further into the second semester, if there are additional things out of the review process, that we would have a process to look at that. Okay, excellent, thank you.
Real quick question. I think I know this answer, but Scott, I appreciate all the paperwork, by the way, that came with it. Is there ever a situation where you've got recommendations approved up through the division chair level that you've rejected that the board would want to hear about?
That has happened, it didn't happen this year,
Okay,
but it has happened.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I also just wanted to thank you for the context of the historical spend, too. That's really helpful. It seems like this year's ask is pretty middle of the road, not, there are a few lower, so it's really just helpful to see. So thanks.
I think it's a testament to our process and to, trying to keep the cost as low as possible. I know there was a Lyons article saying, oh my gosh, we're paying way too much for textbooks, and I was gonna write a response, but it's just gonna sound wonky, but but what our families pay is significantly less than most any other school we've been able to compare to for textbooks.
Well, and
Thank you.
And I appreciate that that is a constant consideration, and that we're not going to the model that is the college model, where those books have to be independently purchased and dealt with. That's just, it's.
Well, someone way before me started this process, and as Brian and I have said, no one would start this process now, it would be too expensive. But since it's going, let's ride it as long as we can.
And once you kind of get off that train, you're never getting back on.
Yeah.
Because then you've given away, essentially the inventory, all that sort of thing, and so then you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
repurchase all that, so.
Right.
That's a huge outlay.
Well, it's a huge
Yeah.
outlay, and also too, you just want to ensure that the students have the books in there, that it's not like, oh, I'm not going to get this right away, we'll see, or whatever. I just, in all regards, I appreciate the process.
It's a little bit more control back in our space, and it also is very helpful, I think, for our students too, from a financial standpoint. It definitely helps the families, because I've looked at some of this, at the fees in some of our other schools, and ours look good. Thanks.
First reading, we'll come back for a second reading in February.
Okay, that is good stuff, and I think we can move on to the next part of our agenda, which is our strategic plan with Dr. Owens. Actually, I'll turn it over to Dr. Waterman first.
Well, yeah, just real quickly, I want to thank our teaching staff and administrative staff out here who've been very patient, listening to policy review and all of that, getting ready. First of all, we thank you for coming tonight, and we're excited to hear about all the great work that's happening under Goal 2. The board will find that this update is formatted very similar to what we did for Goal 1, Goal 3, and Goal 4. So tonight's Goal 2, and then in February we'll come back and Goal 5. And really the general format is Dr. Owens is going to cover like an overview of the goal, the strategies, the objectives, the metrics, and then dig a little deeper into two of the strategies around the student handbook review and the co-teaching model as well. So the format will look pretty similar to what you saw in November and December. And with that, I'll turn it over to Leslie.
Waterman, thanks, President Dillon. We do have a slide deck, and
You have the HDMI cable hooked up or no?
yes. Well, it's plugged into my computer. I don't know if that means it's actually connected there. The slide deck, at least slides 1 through 12 were included in the board packet. There have been some updates to the additional slides at the end that will be discussed by Maggie Quain and Tiz Lambert in just a few. I'm going to go through the Goal 2 overview update first, and then we'll turn it over to our co-teaching team. I'm also going to be trying to drive this slide deck while talking, so bear with me. All right, so I have the privilege of being the goal champion for Goal 2, which deals with our learning environment and supports, and the goal is to provide a safe, positive, inclusive, and engaging learning environment. And there are 3 strategies that you see that fall under this goal. This goal is very broad. We really, within this goal, deal with everything from attendance and behavior to interventions, academic interventions, social and emotional learning, school climate, extracurricular activities. So it's a wide array. So tonight I'm going to hit some of the highlights that our action planning team has, the tasks underneath each of these strategies that we are working on for this school year. We also have tasks that are coming in the forthcoming school years, and like Dr. Waterman said, then kind of highlight 2 of the things that we are currently working on right now. But as you can see, strategy 4, build confidence, self-sufficiency, and wellness in students by improving intervention systems and other supports for academic and social and emotional learning. 5, engaging all stakeholders and creating a positive school climate. Strategy 6, exploring opportunities to enhance the student day and year that result in increased participation, curricular electives, and extracurricular activities. Our scorecard, as you know, went live on our website recently, and so these are the metrics, the official metrics that correspond with our strategies. You'll see, again, it really goes through a wide variety of different measures, so everything from attendance and chronic absenteeism, student behaviors, 9th grade on track. Where we have it, we've got our baseline indicated, which is based on our traditional or historical data, and then we also have our targets there that we are projecting based on trends over the past couple of years, and obviously acknowledging that throughout the pandemic, a lot was impacted, and so just making sure that we are continuing to look forward, make progress, and do that in a way that's incremental and attainable. We also have a couple metrics that will be coming soon. We have done a panorama survey, and we will be collecting all of that data, putting our baseline in there, and then setting our goals for that. Those panorama survey and the 5 essentials, that really speaks to our perceptions on school climate, belonging, diversity, inclusion. So those are some of the newer metrics that we're working with, and panorama is a new survey system that we are working with, and I think will provide us with a lot of really good information toward this goal. Also, we do update, I know the board received an update, I think for first quarter on attendance, behavior measures. We will be processing all of our second quarter data and sending that in an update very, very soon. So strategy 4, the way I organize this, again, just a reminder of what the strategy is, and then what are we doing right now and how are we measuring progress. This is not a comprehensive list. I truly have a 7-page document that includes all of the things we're doing that span these 3 strategies, but I just wanted to hit some of the highlights of the things that we're working on. And again, our committee, our action planning team met over the course of the fall and looked at all of the information that the strategic plan committee provided, all of that data, to determine what do we need to work on now. And for every bullet point you see here, there are anywhere from 2 to 10 specific tasks that fall under that we're working on, and that team monitors, and then our implementation team is carrying forward. But some of the things that fall under strategy 4 include assessing and adjusting our registration process with specific attention to transfer student process. So making sure that we are welcoming families in and doing that in a smooth and welcoming manner, and making sure that we are looking at everything from, academic experience outside of LT, things like if students need a fee waiver, if they're English learners and need to be assessed, if they have an IEP and they need to be assessed or placed in classes. We just want to make sure that that process is really family-centric, and that we're making sure that we're providing top-notch service for everybody who walks through our doors. Partnering with SEL Hub, that's an initiative from the state of Illinois that we are working out of West 40 to increase professional development for social and emotional learning, to get that more systemically embedded. Attendance practices, you've heard updates on that, working with Dr. Tyrell in the AP office on new attendance processes, discipline practices, implementing restorative practices. The comprehensive student handbook review, I will talk about that in just a minute. updating our district critical responses, so school safety, threat assessments, crisis response, VCI, and making sure that all of our processes, procedures, teams are intact, have the training they need, and that everyone is aware of what all of those processes and procedures are. Co-teaching, again, you'll hear about that very soon. Assessing and improving our English learner services, so making sure that we are providing the appropriate English learner services for our community. And then implementation of data-driven student services practices, so really looking at our student services division and ensuring that, just like our curriculum, our student services supports meeting the needs of our students that we're seeing, and how are we assessing that, and how are we ensuring that those are effective. So each of our tasks, and you'll see this on all three strategies in terms of how we're measuring that progress, each of our tasks includes specific steps towards completion, and our action planning team and our implementation teams are going to be monitoring those specific steps, and then the scorecard metrics that are specific to this strategy are listed there, and those were on that last slide that I showed you. So data from surveys, student attendance, behavior, discipline, and then our 9th grade on track metric. Strategy 5, engaging all stakeholders and creating a positive school climate. That was something that was of high priority when we went through the strategic planning process of creating that positive school climate. So what are we doing to affect that? Really everything we do on all of our goals, we hope will impact a positive school climate, but more specifically, we are trying to have more representatives from all of our stakeholder groups in our decision-making and looking at our data and making sure that all voices are heard and included. And those have been included within our student handbook committee, a discipline committee, and then a school day change committee that will be forthcoming starting with second semester and then into next year. We're always investigating increased and improved community partnerships to provide better services to our students and families. We've partnered with a few organizations, and we will continue to expand that. We know that while we can provide a lot to our families in-house, there are certainly things that our families may need that we cannot provide in an efficient or effective way here. So we are always looking for community partnerships through mental health supports, community outreach, whether that's financial assistance, whether it's specific services, but again, always looking for those partnerships and trying to strengthen that to make sure that if we are not able to provide something to our students and our families, that there is somebody within the community that we can connect them with. Referral GPS we've been working with for the last couple of years, and that has really provided our social workers, our counselors, and other staff the ability to work with families to get connected to mental health supports when they need it. It's taken the responsibility of, insurance and payment and all of that out of the hands of our staff, where that's not really their expertise and not something that they can dive into with families, and allowed an outside party to do that, and that really helps our families to be able to provide care that's within a network of their insurance, or care that is on a sliding scale that's affordable, that's local, that's feasible for them. So that's been a really great partnership. And then just in general, increasing our communication, our transparency, and our partnership with families on our academics, attendance, and discipline matters. So really trying to, through different newsletters, different updates, website changes, just making sure that everyone is aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it's going. So giving information about the metrics. So again, how we're measuring that progress for this specific strategy, we're looking at survey data, discipline and behavior data, and then our planning teams and implementation teams will be looking at all the specific tasks that fall under here to make sure that we're hitting those marks. And again, we've got lists of things that are going for, that will be completed by the end of June of 2023, and then a whole list of things for 23, 24, 24, 25, and even out to 25, 26. That will all be evaluated each year by these committees to make sure some things may, their priority may be moved up because we see the need, and some things may take a backseat if we realize that we need to put efforts into a different basket. Strategy 6 is exploring opportunities to enhance the student day and year that result in the increased participation of our students in both curricular activities and extracurricular. And what this is really looking at is current participation by our students. So we're utilizing 5-star to track participation and provide that data specifically to student support teams. Which students are participating in clubs, sports activities, even how many students are attending homecoming dances or things like that, to see where our students where they fall. We know that when students are involved in a few activities, that helps them to be connected, to feel a sense of belonging, and it also improves their academic outcomes. And so this is really important for us to not only track, but be able to get that information to the people who can then either encourage students to find an activity to get involved in, help them decide on an activity. It also gives us an idea of when we may need to offer activities or opportunities at different points. So we know that for some students, after school can be really tough. So what could we offer during the day or before school, or just in a different manner that may improve participation. We also want to look at the graduate portrait that we created as a strategic planning team and use that to help students make choices about curricular electives and extracurricular activities. How can they become really well-rounded LT graduates? What are, if they're looking at themselves as a learner and a student here, where are the gaps in what they've experienced or done, or what are their goals, and how can we maybe suggest something that might help them get to those goals? So we really want to use those graduate portraits, so they're not just, a list of things that sits on a shelf. We want those to be living, breathing characteristics that our students can aspire to, and really, connect the things that are happening here at LT to that portrait. And then we will be this semester looking at, or we will be creating a multidisciplinary committee that will include a variety of stakeholders, including students, families, staff, administration, to look at, to begin investigation of potential school day changes. So I know throughout the pandemic, we had to use a whole different set of bell schedules, and that brought some good things to light and some challenges. And so there's been a lot of interest in, not just from LT, but a lot of schools in our area, on looking at modified bell schedules, different bell schedules, and we want to make sure we're really investigating that to ensure that if we were to recommend a change, that it's something that would really meet the needs of our students and our staff. So the first step will be getting that committee together and kind of creating our plan for that investigation. It'll include site visits and looking at some of the information that other schools have put out. A couple schools in our area have gone through this process, so they have some blueprints for us, or templates that they've kind of worked through, and that will be really helpful to our work. And our goal would be by around this time next year, maybe a little earlier, to have some really robust conversation with data and information to say, is this something we want to take forward and really think about doing, or do we actually, after investigating, think, what, our schedule, our system is where we need to stay. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be really interesting work, and I think it'll be a lot of work, but it'll be interesting and really inform the future here. So again, the scorecard metrics for this particular strategy really look at that participation, but that will expand to include all kinds of things when we dive into more of that school day change information.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
On your previous slide, you did have school day change committee, and on this slide, you're talking about forming, it sounds like, a new committee, so is the school day change committee from the previous slide something that's been ongoing, that's just here? Are they one and the same, or are they two
They're the
different?
same, so it hasn't been created. I was just using that as an example of a way that we're trying to bring in more stakeholder voice. So in the past, that may have been a committee of only educators here, but we really want to pull in student and family voice to that committee. So again, we're trying to expand those roles.
Yeah, actually, real quickly, that we have a school day change committee that's contractual based upon the last time we changed our bell schedule, which was about 7, 8 years ago. And that's been in place to study lunch study halls, the drop-in centers, all the current structure that's in place. The last time our bell schedule was changed, so it's still in place, but obviously, as Leslie talked about, we want to evolve that.
Gotcha, that's great.
Sorry, yes. So, and we've, working with Andrew Johannes to try to figure that out in the best way and make sure that, again, the union's involved in that and that we're moving forward to dig into that.
And that's awesome. I'm super excited to hear that. And then the 5-star program that you mentioned, is that new? Is that something that you're implementing this year?
They started that, was it just this year, or did they start last year?
We definitely used it last year, if not the year before as well.
Been a few years.
Okay, 2 years old.
Before pandemic, actually.
I think the newer part of that is really sending that data to our SSTs and some of the other people in the school to start looking at who is participating and who they might need to kind of reach out to.
That's great, and I would imagine you can disaggregate that into all different layers of freshmen, sophomores, and layer it through as well?
Yes, the one, I I guess, detriment of it is that it's really more lagging data, so we don't see some of that data till the end, which is why we want to look at that a little bit to see is there a better way to monitor some of that more in the moment. When students sign up for clubs or a sport, that's easy. We keep those rosters, but if it's just a student who's participating more kind of in and out of different events, then it's harder for us to know that until the end of the year. So we just want to make sure we have our finger on the pulse of what students are doing throughout the year and not missing anyone. We also know that a lot of our students participate in things outside of LT, and that might take the place for them of, they may be on a travel sport. And we don't want to discount that. We know that's a healthy, great thing. So we want to make sure we're able to kind of track all of that and know what our students are doing, so that we can use that information to help them make choices about their schedule, make choices about courses they want to take, and make choices about, the future for them, so.
That's great. I appreciate that. I appreciate especially if you think of how that's going to look over the course of 4 years, it would be interesting to see where the trends are, even as little things as your freshman students who come in and they sign up for things, and to your point, if it's lagging, then it sounds like you're going to address that, but do they involve themselves, and then all of a sudden do they withdraw? Do you have a portion of the year where they're, a little bit involved, highly involved, but then all of a sudden it tapers off, and having a system like that to kind of, identify that seems like it would be very important and proactive.
And again, we're really looking at, are there other times of the day, and this kind of goes part and parcel with looking at some school day changes, but are there other times of the day where we may want to offer some club opportunities or something where students wouldn't have to come before or after, because we know that could be really difficult, and we don't want to leave students out who just simply cannot be here after school to do those things. So I think this information, when we get to the end of this year, will provide a lot of good information for us to make some of those decisions and make some recommendations, and again, just ensure that there's an opportunity for every single student to be involved in some way, shape, or form, so. One of the highlights is our Student Handbook Review Committee, and again, just wanted to talk through this a little more specifically with the board so you know what we're doing. Myself and Dr. Tyrell are co-facilitating this Handbook Review Committee, and our goal is right there. We want to publish a modern, user-friendly student handbook that documents and supports consistent application of our processes and procedures aligned to best practice, policy, and law. So even some of the policies we talked about today that have anything to do with student handbook, we want to make sure that it's all up to date. It's really clear for our families, and that everything is in compliance. So in order to do this, again, with using that different stakeholder voice and with Fidelity, we've created a committee that includes administrators, staff, and parents. We set up the process so that we were meeting 6 times throughout October through February. We were meeting on Zoom so that it was convenient for our families and for our staff as well. But we really dig into, at the meeting, looking through the different sections of the handbook and comparing that with some other exemplars. And then our goal ultimately is to have the updated handbook for approval to the board by April. So we have a lot of work to do between now and April to get that rewritten, but we know we'll be able to do that. How we've reviewed it is we took our current handbook and really divided it into 10 to 15 page sections, so everyone knew which sections were going to be discussed at each meeting, so that gave people a little bit of homework, but a little bit of time to really look at those sections in detail. And Dr. Tyrell had created a feedback form and used some guidance that comes from different organizations so that the members of the team knew how to review it, and we were looking at all different things, looking at content, looking at language. There's a lot of outdated language, for example, in ours, so we want to make sure we're updating that language, and then again comparing it with some other updated handbooks from area schools. We don't need to necessarily reinvent the whole wheel here, but what does an updated handbook look like that is really family-friendly, student-friendly, and provides great information? And then we've been using a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to say, okay, within this section, we're looking at discipline today. What are the strengths of our current handbook? What are some of our weaknesses? And what do we want to incorporate? So the next set of edits will really be taking the edits that the committee has provided and getting those to all of the administrators within our district that we would need their technical information. So for example, there's some academic information in the student handbook. We'll need Scott to be looking at that to say, okay, this matches with our APG, this is outdated. We want to make sure that everything in there is up to date with any change we've made. The attendance policies and procedures, our APs have been working really hard on attendance. We want to make sure that everything that goes into the new handbook is completely updated and there's, nothing that's outdated. And then, rather than having students on this committee, because it's quite a bit of work and we know that students are busy, and to give them sort of more homework and more, it'd be like, taking another class after school. Dr. Tyrell is going to be taking the draft to her principal advisory council and having the students review it in total and look through and give us any feedback that they might have from a student perspective. We want their voice in there for sure. And then finally, the administrators would get a chance to see it, and Franzik would, of course, approve it in terms of legal compliance before it comes to all of you for that final approval. So it's been a great process. It's been a lot of work. We've been really proud of the committee and how invested they are. They're really excited about the work we're doing, and our parents have been such a great group of participants on those calls to give their perspective and say, as a parent, this is what I absolutely need to see right away, or this makes no sense, or who are you writing this to? So it's been, it's a little humbling always, and just a good exercise to go through. So any questions on any of that? I know I was rushing through that quickly. The next update is the big moment of co-teaching here, so any questions before we get to that?
I just think that, I know that we talked about it well over a year ago. Jill mentioned it. We were talking about how does the student handbook relate to the board policy manuals and things like that, and just really putting that kind of effort and time into it. It's it can be a really daunting task, but it's so critical, and it's such a useful tool, I think, for people, or could be more of a useful tool for our families. So I appreciate that you guys have taken all the time to put forth this effort. I'm looking forward to seeing it in April, and that's a lot to get done between now and then, so good luck.
We'll have it, but yes, no.
Appreciate it.
Lots of exciting stuff, and thanks to you and everybody else who's working on all of these important things, and my interest is peaked in many, many areas I look forward to hearing back on.
It really is a goal that spans every area of the district, so the action planning team, it's been really fun to be facilitating that and work with so many different people in different aspects of the school, and you just realize our learning environment is made up of so many different things, and it means so many different things to different students, so it's just a really cool, I think it's a really cool thing to be a part of.
You probably mentioned this, but how frequently, or how long ago was the student handbook last updated?
So we did a quick review of that last summer. So from April through July, and we actually brought it to the board in August.
Right.
And prior to that, it had been several years.
It's been updated in pieces each year, pretty much. I know the administrators would get sections and say, check this over and make sure you make updates, which people have been doing. So it's not, I don't want to say it's completely out of date, but it definitely reads like a document right now that has been updated by different people at different times. And so we just want a really cohesive, easy to navigate, something that we can have online, we can have printed. So yeah, the information is current.
This is the most significant, collaborative, comprehensive update, though.
Yes.
I just was trying to get at how much the fact that we rolled out the strategic plan, how much of that drove this process, and it sounds like perhaps a fair bit.
Yep.
So that's
Absolutely,
great.
yeah.
Okay.
And it really does kind of set the foundation for a lot of things. So it's a big task, but I really think that it will make a lot of other work that will follow easier because we'll have this guide. So not to oversell it, but I do think it's an important document that will set the table for a lot of other things.
Great work.
All right, so I want to highlight co-teaching, and we have a whole group here that I want to introduce, and I'm so thankful that they've been sitting here. But we have obviously implemented co-teaching for the first time here, and we know that co-teaching is not a new thing in education, but it is new for LT, and it is new for the educators that are here, and they have just, spoiler alert, completely knocked it out of the park so far this year. So I want to introduce them. I'm going to go through a little bit of just the background, where we're at, where we're going, and then two of the co-teachers, Tiz Lambert and Maggie Queen, are going to give you a little bit more of a specific look at what co-teaching has been like during the school year. So we've got in the front row, Dr. Dan Bies is the Division Chair for Global Studies. Dr. Melissa Moore is the Division Chair for Special Education. Ms. Karen Reno is the Division Chair for Language Arts. And then we've got Mackenzie Burke, We've got Mackenzie teaches English, sorry. John Kromfeld teaches world history. We've got Luke Jansen teaches world history. Tiz Lambert teaches special education. Brian Murray teaches special education. Ed Petrak teaches special education. Stuart Jackson Turner teaches special education, and then Maggie Quain teaches English. So they will talk to you more about everything, but I just want to again say that this has been such an awesome implementation so far this year. We started planning earlier than this time last year, and then everything kicked off with some workshops and things at the end of last year and into the summer. So they've done a lot of work in a really short time. But again, I'll give you just kind of an overview, and they'll give you more specifics. So as it says, co-teaching is an essential service delivery option in an inclusive school. This is a way that our special education students can be provided with special education services within a general education classroom, and that really allows for that inclusion and allows for us to ensure that the rigor is there even when students are potentially needing some accommodations or modifications, but allows them to make great progress toward their goals and toward the academic standards for the grade level. I'm not going to go through all these models right now. We're going to come back to that. Tiz Lambert will go through those in just a minute, but those are, when you think about co-teaching, the foundation of co-teaching, it's really based on the different models of co-teaching, and so we'll talk about that in just a few. This is the chart that depicts our implementation of co-teaching, our planned implementation over the next few school years. So right now, this school year, we are working just with English 1 and World History. So we wanted to phase this in beginning with a freshman class. So our freshman class for this year, we received all of the recommendations. Our special education team goes out to the junior high schools, our associate schools, runs those IEP meetings, gets the recommendations, and so enrollment was based on the recommendations of those IEP teams. So we started with English 1 and World History, and that's where we're at right now. But next year we are quickly accelerating, so we already have plans in the works. We've already brought in and done planning with Colin Boyd, our DC for Math and Science, Kurt Johns, our DC for Physical Welfare, and that will be the list of classes. So that ensures that our current freshman students can now take all of their sophomore graduation requirements as well as a co-taught class, and then again moving through the years that eventually, or by the end of their senior year, all of those graduation requirements will be offered as a co-taught class as well. What typically happens is that students don't need as much special education or co-taught support as they go through the years, so we anticipate fewer sections as the years go on, but we do want to have a co-taught option for all of those graduation requirements. We feel like that is an inclusive and supportive course offering for our students in special education. Professional development, I just wanted to give a quick highlight here. We've been working with Dr. Tammy Barron out of Western Carolina University, and she is a nationwide expert in secondary co-teaching. So we found her through Dr. Marilyn Friend, who's a guru. Marilyn Friend really focuses more on elementary schools, and Dr. Barron has really worked in secondary schools. So we are working with her, and that started last year when she virtually worked with our administrative team just to give us kind of the lay of the land of what should co-teaching look like, how do you support co-teaching as the administrative team within the building. And then we did a two-day summer workshop with Dr. Barron and our co-teachers, which introduced the models, especially design, instruction, and planning. Dr. Barron came back in October for 2 days, so that was the October Institute Day on Friday. Thursday she was here and she observed in every single co-taught classroom and then provided specific feedback to each of the pairs, as well as did a SWOT analysis for our entire district where our strengths were. I have to say, she was so impressed with our team. She couldn't stop talking about it. Already mentioned that we should be presenting on a national stage about what's happening here at LT. Really praised the administrative support that is happening for co-teaching across the board. Praised the just absolute hard work from the teams, their enthusiasm and their willingness to jump into this work. So it was such a wonderful couple days to have her here, and a really bright spot and a testament to the work that everybody that you see in the audience has been doing. So she's coming back in February for the same type of training. She'll be here for 2 days. The first day we'll be doing those classroom observations. She follows the protocol and really gives very specific feedback about what she sees, recommendations, sits down then on the second day and has that conference with the pairs to say, I saw this, it was great, this is what I think you could try, and then provides a written report, and we'll do the same kind of SWOT analysis for the district. So the plan for next year because we're going to be including math and science. Dr. Barron has a colleague, Dr. Brad Witzel, also at the same Western Carolina University, who is a math co-teaching expert, and we want to bring him in and Dr. Barron in for that summer time to really work with our special ed math co-teachers and the math teachers, just because math is so different and it can be a little bit intimidating in terms of a content to teach, specifically for some of our special education teachers who may not have been teaching a lot of math in the last few years. So we want to make sure that our teachers are well prepared. That partnership is essential, and feeling like you can both contribute to that content is really important. So that is the plan. The other thing that's not on this list but that we've been doing is we meet every other week. For the most part, there are some weeks we've had to miss due to other district things going on, but in our teams. So the teams are meeting every single day, and they'll talk more about that. But as a larger team of the world history team and the English team, we meet every other week to just talk about what's going on, what are the highs, what are the lows, what can we problem solve, what ideas can we share, and that's been really a really powerful thing for the teams, and certainly for me and our division chairs to have time with all of the teachers and really hear about what's working, what's not, what do we need to tweak. Simple changes or seemingly simple changes, but like a classroom change for second semester came out of some of those conversations. Just physical space means a lot to co-teaching. So there are a lot of things that we've been able to really problem solve in the moment based on that. And again, our teachers are meeting every single day, and so they're sharing ideas all the time and working with each other to improve practice. So it's been such just an awesome endeavor this year and a really bright spot. So I'm going to turn this over to Tiz Lambert and Maggie Quain come to the podium and present on the teacher perspective and talk about those co-teaching models. So I'm going to go back to that slide first, and then we'll go forward.
Do you have a switch so you can make sure if this is on? We'll do that.
Okay. I'm Tiz Lambert. I am the special education chair of this team.
I'm Maggie Quain, and I'm the general education English teacher working with kids.
I just want to take the opportunity to really say thank you to the Board of Education, to our central leadership team, and to our amazing chairs. Truly, this has been just an amazing opportunity, and I've been teaching here at LT for 18 years, and I will wholeheartedly say that this has been one of my best years. Working with Maggie has been amazing. So it is truly something that's been long awaiting, and to have this year is just really amazing. So thank you very much. So we just want to start by looking over the models of co-teaching. And there are 6 models. We've actually coined a 7th one that I'll add in the diagram, but I'll talk about that briefly. So some of them are pretty obvious. The one teach, one observe. This one is actually really useful because one of the things that gets lost, and one of the things for myself from going from a 13-person classroom to a 26-person classroom was really eye-opening. I am not sure how these teachers do it by themselves. It's really a difficult task. And the one teach and one observe has really allowed us to really take a step back while one is teaching to collect data that will then guide our instruction, which is really important. So we actually have created a spreadsheet that has student names and data points and things that are specifically aligned to a student's IEP, and also students without IEPs that would benefit from some data collection. The other one is one teach, one assist. That one's pretty obvious. One's teaching and one's kind of walking around. The one that we actually coined, which I didn't understand, but Dr. Barron had said that she was kind of shocked to see this, but it's kind of where we introduce the topic together, and then the two of us assist students, and that was just so natural for us. But she says that that's not very typical, and how impressed she was to see kind of that implementation. I mean, there is never a dull moment. We are moving, and it is a very active classroom because of these models. Parallel teaching is one that we use quite often. It's essentially splitting the room in half and teaching the exact same lesson. However, one group will receive, which I'll talk more about, some specially designed instruction, whereas another group will receive just the core curriculum as is. We're looking at station teaching. This is another one that we use quite often. And normally when you think of station teaching, you think of like progressing from one skill to another, but this is not quite how that works. It's kind of meeting students where they're at. So if there's a writing process that we're going through, and we divide the groups up into, one group is working on their claim, another one is working on evidence, another group is working on analysis, and we can even have a fourth group that's working independently, maybe looking at videos or kind of taking that more accelerated step to enrichment. So they don't necessarily build on each other. It's really taking formative assessment and seeing where students are at and then placing them in those stations where they need to be. And then there's alternative teaching. This almost follows station teaching because there's always students that are a small group of students that are still left that really need that extra support and reteaching. And so it's pretty much like, let's say 3/4 of the class is working on the core curriculum, and then you have a group of students that is off doing something different. Or the opposite, perhaps there's a group of students that need enrichment. So this kind of works both ways. Because you have two, licensed teachers and experts in their field working in the same space, which has been awesome. And then the last one is team teaching. So here's the misconception. I literally thought like this was the mecca of co-teaching. Here's you, two co-teachers up there jiving together, teaching together. This is actually the model that is less desired and a little bit more awkward. You're kind of talking over each other. It takes a lot. It's almost scripted, and we kind of don't have time to do a script. So we've learned a lot that actually standing in front of a class and teaching isn't really what we feel is our best use of our time. Using these models has improved our teaching as a whole and has improved student learning so much, just based on the assessments that we've been giving and our results for, we didn't have any failures this year of our class. So that speaks to a lot for what's happening within the classroom. So what makes co-teaching unique? So Dr. Owens had mentioned many of these, but the pace and rigor is actually something that I do want to pay special attention to. In the past, cross-categorical teachers have done a really nice job and worked hard in aligning state standards and skills and outcomes to the prep classes. However, the pace and rigor is something that always gets lost because just with the intense needs of students in cross-cat classes, that's just not possible. And as a result of that, there's not as much curriculum being addressed because of that pace. So this really allows students with disabilities that access to that pace and rigor, which is super important. Attention, engagement, and social emotional learning. Those are huge pieces. In addition to content, we are looking at, looking at our lessons through an equity lens and looking through social emotional learning and applying that SDI to all of those aspects. We talked about Goldie Muhammad today. We can talk about joy and co-teaching. Also, improve academic achievement, closing that gap, right? They're receiving more curriculum, so that gap is being closed. And then to licensed educators, and we can't get better than that, with our own expertise. I've learned so much from Maggie, and it's been great being in the classroom and kind of working together and being a team. It truly is a marriage, and it's so amazing that it does bring to my teaching. I mean, this has been an amazing year, and it's truly. And then student success. If we're looking at student success, I know we always kind of think of academics, but we're looking at self-confidence and self-esteem, and really allowing underrepresented students the opportunity to access general education classes. So I get kind of emotional. It's really, 18 years I've been here, I've seen a lot. So this has been amazing. So I've gone over the rotation. So what do you see during a typical class period? If the word organized chaos kind of rings a bell, that's our classroom. So there's rotations, there's movement, kids are all over the place. It's fluid as well. We don't have seating charts very often because they come in. Seats are together, seats are in rows, seats are parallel, they're all over the place. So it's definitely not boring. It's a lot of fun, and that kind of increases that engagement and that buy-in. And what's great about that as well, because it's so fluid, I could wholeheartedly say that a lot of the students do not know which are the students with IEPs and which aren't. And what's great about this model, co-teaching in general, is that it's the implementations put in place, the interventions, the strategies are not only solely for those with special needs. Through our documentation and our formative practices, kind of assessing where students are at, there are other students that need extra help and support. So it's really been nice to be able to provide those students with that support as well and see that, their success as well. So specially designed instruction. So essentially, we have the rotation models, and then specially designed instruction is really the essence of co-teaching. And when you look at specially designed instruction, you can look at it more from like a content perspective and the delivery perspective. We kind of looked over the rotations as the delivery. How are we going to deliver this content to students? But also looking at it at the content. What modifications, what changes, what strategies are we going to use to the core curriculum for students? And that could be from mnemonic devices to graphic organizers. We could be looking at behavior modification plans for students, more contact with parents, sticky notes on desks. So it really does change, and we're learning as we go. There's so much SDI out there that, we as a group talk, and we're like, hey, what did you use, or what did you come up with? So it's been great learning new things. The one-on-one co-teaching could not have come at a better time with our one-to-one initiative. And technology is a huge piece in co-teaching. And allowing students to use Canvas and use tech devices has been really a universal design for all students. We've been able to use Canvas in a way that we can actually send students documents, different documents, and assign them, so they're all opening up the document, but they're actually getting different things, which actually helps with that activity and being able to, just make students feel more confident. And then that data collection is really important, like I said. So this is, we are intentionally, this is an example of one of our documents that we use to collect information and kind of keep a running record of what we're doing. This was recommended by Dr. Barron and Dr. Friend. So just every single lesson, if we look from August till tomorrow, we have all of this documented. Our learning target, the activities that we're using, the assessments, our co-teaching approach, and then the SDI that's we're implementing. For this specific example, we were teaching students how to use a graphic organizer. To my surprise, a graphic organizer in itself is not SDI. It's teaching students how to use a graphic organizer. We do a lot of color coding and a lot of chunking. So it's really allowed us to be creative in our teaching and really looking at where the specific learning needs are and addressing those specific learning needs. We have many students with attention deficit, whether with 504 plans or whether IEPs, and it's been really great to be able to kind of learn new strategies. And these are the 3 rotations that we use most often. So after we present our lesson as a whole group, we move into parallel teaching. From the information that we gather from parallel teaching, we move into stations. And again, from that data collection from station teaching, then we move into alternative. And that alternative, again, could be enrichment, it could be remedial, extra time addressing IEP goals. It could look differently. It's all you, girl.
Okay, so I believe this was mentioned earlier about the fact that each co-teaching team receives a common planning period to work together every single day. And it is so amazing to be able to sit down, not just together as a pair, but also with our other team teaching English 1P, just so that we can make sure that we provide a really common experience, and also so that we can learn from each other, because you mentioned this is all new to us, and so there's a lot to learn. Tiz showed you kind of that progression from learning target all the way to what kind of SDI are we implementing in order to best meet students' needs, and that really comes into play when we do goal setting, collaboration, and brainstorming for our plans. Because we have the time together, we don't want to waste it. And so goal setting is super important at the beginning of the week, sometimes day to day. What do we want to get done in this planning period? Do we want to spend half the time so that Mackenzie and I can check in on our pace, and Tiz and Stuart can check in on what SDI we're implementing? Do we want to spend the second half grounding a rubric together? It's really important to have that agenda set in order to collaborate effectively. That collaboration portion, shared responsibility, sharing resources, sharing experiences about what worked for Mackenzie and Stuart periods 1 and 2 versus what worked for us periods 6 and 8. We like to get get the inside scoop a little bit and make those tweaks and changes later on in the day, which is really great to be able to collaborate with them. And then division of tasks, making sure that, we are talking and collaborating together during that time, but, we also get time to work with, fellow special education or general education teachers to make sure that we're really dividing up those tasks and fulfilling our roles. Brainstorming and curriculum review, it's also really important to continue to review curriculum as a team, as a whole, because coming from not teaching the course before, and I really want to make sure that if this is a true partnership, that the kids don't always know, right, what our roles are, and so making sure that we both know the curriculum really well, that we can both teach that content is super important. Grounding rubrics with student work, I mentioned before. Data collection, Tiz did a great job talking about really how we collect data on our students, not just based on assessments, but also tracking in our spreadsheets, how often is the student using their supports that we provide? How often are they reading a book with audio? How often are they using tools like Kami, online annotation tools, versus writing on paper? We want to keep track of that so that we can best meet their needs on a day-to-day basis. Reflection is huge. I love that we get to do it right now, too. Thinking about what worked and what didn't, what notes need to be made for next time, and also what notes need to be made for future teams that are created to make sure that they're even more successful than what we have been able to experience this year. And then finally, communication with parents. We do a lot of discussion around drafting newsletters, making sure that our newsletters are translated, working with our bilingual coordinator, sending updates, and really staying consistent across our team so that the newsletter that we're sending out looks similar to the newsletter that Mackenzie and Stuart are sending out on their team. What have we learned so far? Lots of things. Number one, communication between partners is key. This, I feel like, is so obvious, but making sure that we're not just communicating what we're doing today, but we're also communicating those core classroom routines that we want to implement together, classroom norms, working on collaborating together and also with our students to figure out how do we want this classroom to look and feel and run in order to make it that safe space, a place where they can experiment and try new things and take risks. But also that communication even between lessons. We might experience something 6th period and then look at each other and be like, yep, different, and totally, make those changes for 7th period in a matter of minutes, and that's really important. Space is huge. I think you talked about this. Realizing that as flexible as the space can be, that's really important if we're going to be willing and really experimenting with these models, to be able to shift in a smaller classroom from, whole class to parallel takes a while. It's a lot of moving and yanking desks and things like that. And so what we've learned is that flexibility, even within the space, is really, really helpful to effectively contribute those kind of, differentiated models. Saving time for reflection, of course, is important and allows us to really grow and improve over time, and also, again, share those experiences with future teams. And then flexibility both in the classroom and during the planning process is really crucial. I've learned so much from you, and so to be able to really learn to let go, as a general education teacher, and to really truly have a partnership and collaborate is so crucial for the success of a pair, the success of a team, and also the future, success of future teams. So. Kids are talking. And just a few highlights. I mean, you can read all these bullet points, but I think the biggest thing that we noticed is that it's really clear that students can see that they're getting the one-on-one attention more often than maybe they would see in a single teacher setting. You'll also notice that, they feel like they can get help faster, that they feel, if one teacher is doing something, but I really have a question, then, instead of waiting until there's a better transition so I can get to that student, right, Tiz is on it, or I'm on it while Tiz is doing something in the classroom. And so that really just allows all of our students to have their needs met really quickly, which is great. And then something I love too is that students mention that it's really great when you have two teachers that work well together. And so, knowing that our kids see how important that collaboration is, and that it should be visible, and it should be clear that we both are showing up every day, loving to be there, talking to each other, communicating, collaborating, that really matters to them, because again, they can see it, and I think it really sets the tone for the space. And that's all. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's been really amazing. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Incredible.
Yeah.
As Tiz said, I want to echo thank you. We know that co-teaching is an enormous financial, human resource, are needed to make sure that this is implemented well, and we're just so grateful to the board for supporting this and really excited to see where this goes. Truly thank you to all the teachers who have jumped into this, who have worked really hard this year. Thank you to the DCs for supporting this, and yeah, as you can see, it's great. And certainly if you have any questions or want to ask anyone in the audience anything, feel free.
Modeling something that would be considered a national standard or something that somebody else wants to emulate. So I appreciate that. I think it really comes through with that passion and commitment that you guys obviously, share with us today. I wanted to ask just a question again, because that concept of space kind of resonated with me. I wanted to know, what percentage of our classrooms are we using now that need to have that kind of space and that flexibility, and what would that look like going down the road, especially with us expanding our offerings?
Yeah, we've definitely, just the size of the space is important, and we know that we don't have a ton of big classrooms, but there are big classrooms on both campuses, so we've already started planning, the division chairs, our associate principals, looking at our classroom space. We've kind of always used a model here where divisions have certain spaces that they've used, not that they haven't been flexible and supportive with one another, but just looking at the way we use our space slightly differently. And then the furniture within our spaces, so I know that's something we've talked about in our facility studies, but more modular type of furniture would certainly be a lot easier than, I think Maggie said, yanking desks around and that scraping and trying to get so that would be something I think would be an important thing for us to consider in the future. Just
Exciting part of modernizing our classrooms.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. I think it goes right in hand in hand. It would not need anything really different from that, but having more modern furniture within would make just that movement a lot easier, so.
So, in one of the models, you show, it seemed like the class is faced one way towards the teacher, and then the other half of the class is faced. So, if that's happening, they're being taught different things or information, does one half feel it's distracting in some way, or how do they like kind of hone in and like just like focus in on, you know, the one teacher that they're receiving that instruction versus the other teacher on the other side? Like, that's all. I mean, I think it's great information in the way that you guys and your passion there. I'm just wondering, has there been any kind of complaints?
I think, you know, when Tish showed the parallel model, for example, when we read a short story together, we split into parallel, and I think in our little B116, it was definitely close quarters, which, you know, I think does contribute. So making sure that we can, you know, we really tried to set it up so that we could get students as far away from each other as possible, so that we were really honed in on, you know, if you're in this group, you're listening in this section, or you're reading here, and if you're in this group, you know, you're doing your best to listen to Ms. Queen or whoever's, you know, working that way. But yeah, I think space has a lot to do with that.
And I think for future teacher teams, it's really improving protocols for these models for students. So Dr. Mayer recommends that you only pay for them for a little while, for weeks, so that they learn that procedure and understand the norms that go along with that procedure. So it's really more, the space is a challenge, but with the rotations in general, there is a lot of teaching that goes along with the actual transitioning lessons and with students, especially students that are practicing this.
Thank you.
I'm just beyond thrilled to hear the passion, to hear everything that has been accomplished this year, to see the rollout that, you know, of where it's going in the next few years. That's just incredible. So I wrote down space as well, particularly with the facility planning and discussions that we've been having. The other thing that pops right back into my mind from your presentation earlier is the school day change committee. I hear, you know, with the moving and the regrouping of kids that is necessary to be at that optimum level of best practice, you got to think, like, I actually pulled up the bell schedule, like, how many minutes do they have to do all this? And you look at 48 minutes and you think, wow, that's even more impressive that you're doing all that in 48 minutes. And then, of course, the next thought is like, geez, I wonder what they could do with 55. Or, you know what I mean? So I'm excited that all these things, and I'm sure, you know, if we get into that there will be objectives and goals of things that we're trying to solve like that, which would be so incredibly worthy. And just kudos to all of you. Like, thank you so much for just putting forth a stellar start to something that I can only imagine is just going to get better and better, and hopefully will have a rippling effect elsewhere throughout LT as well. And it sounds like it's going to have a rippling effect nationally as well. So, thank you.
Coming soon. And any of the pairs could have stood up and given that presentation in terms of showing you how passionate they are about this, the hard work they've done. And we've already started thinking about how this group will become that mentor group for our next teachers, and that will be, you know, they didn't have the benefit of that resource, but the teachers to follow will have such an amazing resource in the teachers that are sitting here. So again, just thank you so much for the support. This is a really exciting thing for us and for our students.
And so we have 2 courses, but is it 4 total class periods of 2? Is it 2 English, 2 world history?
No. Yep, 6 and 5. 6 English sections and 5 world history.
Excellent.
And that's all driven based on the special education student numbers and how many students we can have in each section. So. Thank you so much for letting us present.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. That was great.
Yeah, I would just echo thank you to our staff group. They started their day at 7 a.m. in the Reber Center for our Institute Day activities, and obviously ending their day at 9 o'clock and then back here in the morning to welcome students back. So huge thanks to the work they're doing, but also for today as well. So thank you.
Totally. Appreciate it so much.
Not easy to go first in things.
Yeah.
So again, kudos on that element as well. And from what I can tell, you're modeling great behavior, great enthusiasm, and practices, and I can't wait to see it roll out further. It was, it's just awesome. Looks like it's taken off, for sure.
Goal 2.
Yeah.
So, as I said before, like that's kind of the format of how we want to share these strategic plan goal updates. We'll come back in February with Goal 5 with Brian Stashak and Ed Tennant. So thanks to Dr. Owens for showing us the way on Goal 2.
Sending data quarter by quarter in terms of some of those metrics, and then the scorecard will be updated, so, and if any,
online,
at any
right?
point, just let me know.
Excellent, yeah. It's on our website, great. On our new website.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Very exciting. All right, well, I guess that's it for the agenda tonight, but at this time now, we begin the non-agenda related portion of our public comments. So Marilyn, do we have any? We do have some public comments. Okay, great. Before we begin with that, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for sticking around for this very long meeting. We have a lot to cover, obviously. And as a reminder, there are 2 opportunities for our audience members to address the Board of Ed. Agenda-related comments are welcome at the beginning, and non-agenda-related comments before we adjourn. We appreciate community participation, but please understand the board does not engage in dialogue or discussion with public speakers. If there is a specific question or comment that requires follow-up, an appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Thank you. Lastly, pursuant to Board Policies 2230 and 830, individuals addressing the board are expected to conduct themselves with respect and civility. And as always, in the interest of time, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you for cooperating with us to make this evening's meeting efficient and productive. And Marilyn, if you would call our first speaker, please.
Sue Goby.
Okay. My name is Sue Goby. I am a parent of 2 kids, one that just graduated a couple of years ago, one that's graduating this year, so I appreciate everything that everybody does. I really, it's an amazing school system, and we've been really grateful to be able to be a part of it. I'm also a resident of Howard Avenue in Willow Springs, which abuts the property that's going to be sold. And I have some questions regarding the nature of the decisions that got made to sell that property. I'm curious as to why it was decided to be this closed bid situation instead of seeking something more in the public good. I reached out to the Forest Preserve to find out if they had been invited to bid, and I did receive word back from Christopher Addis, who is their site acquisition person, and he said that he is the correct person to talk about land acquisition, but they would love to have the property, but it's priced out of their price range. This seems to be a much more in keeping with the public good that the school district should be trying to look toward. It's not just a profit motive. It should be looking towards the public good. It should be looking towards educational values. The property is full of wildlife. And it seems a real shame once it's gone, that if it gets developed and that all that'll be gone. So I guess I'm really curious as to whether there was any talk about tailoring the invite to bid towards more public-minded purchasers, or if it's purely the highest bidder that's going to be able to develop that property. I don't know if there's anyone that can answer that question here.
Excuse me. We won't be, not at this time,
All right.
thank you.
Well, I'm very curious.
But we're listening, thank you.
Yeah, and so my other question was related to regulatory nature of that piece of property as well, and whether the property has been looked into for endangered species. I see bats flying over my backyard every year. It's beautiful, and they're a depleting resource of also all kinds of incredible birds and things like that. It's a really untouched, beautiful spot, and if it gets developed from an environmental perspective, I'm very concerned. So I'm wondering if the Illinois EPA MSBA has been involved, if there's any attempt to reach out to the local tribes to find out if there's any archaeological sites there, if there are any historic SHPO-related matters, any of that kind of thing that needs to be looked into before the property is sold, because it just seems like a very precious spot that shouldn't be ruined unnecessarily. Thank you.
Fred Whitting?
Good evening. My name is Fred Whiting, and Sue is my neighbor, new neighbor. I've been there for 39 years, and I've watched the whole area develop. And to the credit of the area, it's all been developed residential, single-family home. It's a very rural, quiet neighborhood, and I'm going to read most of the rest of it. First contention I have is that I don't think LT needs to sell the property, because in 2002 it was appraised at $10 million, and now apparently it's appraised at $55 million. And if you do the quick math on that, it's about 8.5% return, which is probably the best thing you got going. On any of these things, I offer anybody to comment or get back to me on it. But, with $80 million tax levy and $33 million cash reserve, LT should consider to be a very sound financial shape, and shouldn't be selling a valuable asset like that. But secondly, if it is sold, LT should partner with the developer and the Willow Springs board to guarantee the best use and optimal tax return. As stated in the frequently asked questions on the website, LT will not be involved in the process of engaging Willow Springs to seek any zoning change. Now that is a little bit, and we'll leave it to the buyer. That's a little contrary to how I read the terms and condition, but on the website, that's how it's stated. And that's very concerning, and precisely why LT should maintain control of the property throughout the whole development, all the proposals, until satisfactory agreement is reached. The neighborhood west and south of the property, along with the school and the park, will be most affected by the development of this site. Regarding community involvement, back in 2005, which is the last time they entertained the idea of selling it, LT hired a Strawbeck consultant. I expect some of you had reviewed those earlier efforts to determine the best use, and worked with Willow Springs Board, along with holding many community meetings, which ultimately resulted in LT concluding it was in their best financial interest to retain the property after a year of study, at least a year. And I have all these documents. If you would like any copies of them, you can contact me. The reports and the letters from the superintendent and the president at the time. On December 5th board meeting, President Dillon stated, "Currently we are in the process of hearing from our community as a result of the communications we sent out last week. To my knowledge, no one in this neighborhood is aware of any communication from LT. I personally left 2 phone calls with the Community Relations Director requesting a return call with no response. And my basic question is, what was the communication? In 2005, approximately 500 residents signed a petition to maintain the property as single-family homes. These are part owners in this land and have paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes to the district. High-end residential sells. It has been developed all around there, all Burr Ridge, even Willow Springs has a lot of high-end residential. It all sells. But what doesn't sell is high-density housing. And at the corner of Willow Springs and Archer can attest to that. They've been trying to sell those forever. Senior housing is a big risk because it potentially could wind up off the tax roll. As
Mr.
an
White,
example-
can you potentially wrap this up in the next 30
Sorry?
seconds? Can you finish up in about 30 seconds, please?
Yeah, I got like just a paragraph left to bump. If you don't mind, I've waited all night to say this.
I understand.
As an example of recent development with disregard for the neighborhood, consider the UPS land and Hodgkins truck parking lot constructed on Willow Springs Road. If UPS were to buy this land and force the annexation from Willow Springs into Hodgkins, they likely would show the same disregard. Increased traffic, noise, light pollution, children's safety at the park and school, vacant buildings, and destruction of the existing quiet rural community as are all likely if commercial and high-density housing is permitted. Commercial property will result in excess amount of car traffic along with foot traffic from UPS. There's foot traffic back and forth from UPS right now, so if they're going to be crossing the road to go to some commercial facility, there's no doubt that'll happen. So, in conclusion, my recommendation, and it's not just mine, as I say, 500 people had signed a petition in the past. LT, Willow Springs, District 107, which is Pleasantdale, and the Pleasantdale Park have a very unique responsibility. It's a very unique piece of property, and I suggest they all work together to maintain the community as we have all invested our lives in. And if it's just left to the buyer to do, as stated in the frequently asked questions, I think that's really irresponsible action. Thank you.
Marilyn, do we have anyone else? Thanks, everyone. I guess that concludes our agenda-related public comments and it kind of wraps up for the rest of the evening. Is there a motion then to adjourn tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, you guys have a great week. Thanks. Bye, Allison. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye, Allison.